Okay. Hi, Shola. I'm back. I think.
Okay.
Hi, Shola.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
My internet just. Maybe you should record from your end. What do you think?
Okay, that's fine.
Because,
Just a minute.
okay.
Okay. So are we good to start?
Yes. So how many? While I was away, I don't know if there were some people that joined.
Yes, I admitted one more person.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have 6 people as participants, including myself and you. Yeah. So.
Okay. So I think my people are here. Just me one person. Okay. So we can start.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited to have Shola with us. Shola, and then we have people joining from different parts of Canada, and then I have someone from the US. Blessing is joining us from the US. So welcome everyone, and I'll just hand over to Shola to introduce herself, and then we start. Thank you. So Shola.
Thank you, Chi. Hello, everyone. My name is Shola Akoni. I'm a project management professional, CBAP certified. I mean, all my life I've been in the project management field. I have experience of like 15 years. What else about me? I'm married with 2 girls and had a handsome husband. What else? So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me for today's session. I mean, it's so good to see everyone. I mean, I'm very passionate about business analysis. So when I see people going into it, when they wake me up in my dreams and tell me to say something in business analysis, it just comes to me naturally. I love it. So I like to, help work together with people to be able to achieve that aim of, being not necessarily certified. Yeah, I mean, it's good if you want to be certified, but more importantly, becoming an SME, a subject matter expert in business analysis. So thank you all for having me here today. Today's session will be,
Before you go into why we are here today, we have people that they have exams. I have people that they have exam next week. Judy says she has exam in the next 3 weeks. Most people here are taking their exam between now and early next month. Can you just share, do you have any advice for them, any tips, just before we start?
Oh yeah, that's good. I mean, I like to talk about, please stop me when it's, because I like to talk, So please, when I'm talking too much, just stop me. So for the exam, what did I do? Okay, so let me share my experience with you. So last year, summer, at about this time, myself and a friend, we got together. We're like, you know what? We've been postponing the CBAP certification. When are we going to write it? They're like, oh yeah, we'll write it, but we were not reading. So we thought it best for us to form a study group. And so we formed that study group, myself and herself, and they said, oh, I know someone else too. Oh, I know someone else too. To cut the long story short, we're about 5 ladies in the study group. So we started reading. Now, when I say reading, I mean, we started taking turns. So I take a particular topic, the next person will take another particular. We did that for about all the way from July till December. We're taking turns in, sharing experiences. You read, and we found out that those topics in which we took, for example, the topics in which I took, I became a master in it, because you had to study very well before coming to the study group to actually, teach people or educate them about that knowledge area. And then we had to rotate it again. So even though I had taken elicitation and collaboration, I also had to take strategy analysis. And then we just started looking for different techniques. But guess what? The reading was slowed down a bit because it was a study group. However, it actually helped someone like me. It motivated me to start reading. So it got to a point around December that when we want to start any of our sessions, the first thing we do is we recite the knowledge areas, we recite all of the tasks from memory. So we just start and say, okay, so tell me, what are the 600 areas? And we started, oh, we have this, we have this, we have this. Oh, tell me, what are the tasks? We have this, we have this. That really helped. What are the elements? You try to recite, or we had maps in which we were sharing, and you know, just a way to help us commit to memory some of those things. And then I didn't want to take chances. So when it was first week in January, I booked my exams, even though I was not ready. I booked my exams for March, and I said, you know what, it's not going to pass this March. I mean, I've done a lot of, you know, deferring this exam. I'm just going to get it done now. So March 31st, and I told everyone in the study group, oh, I've booked my exam. They're like, oh, what, sure, where? Oh, we've not even finished. We are not happy. I'm like, don't worry. Booking my exams actually spurs me, motivates me to read more. So I booked my exam, and then I started committing 1 hour at a minimum to read every day for those 90 days.
So let me come in here. Do you think that paying for the exam helped to motivate you? As in, did
it
change? You know, why I asked you this question is that Danielle, I told her the same thing. I told her that when you register for the exam, that you see that the motivation will come. Even the way you read, everything will change. And
yes.
I think she's here, so I think that's really what. So for anyone that's here, because I know there's 1 or 2 people that have not registered for the exam. I also told them the same thing. So I'm glad that you are saying this now.
It's one of the first steps of what you want to do. You want to register. Once you register, the game changes. You find yourself, you know, in that normal day where you say that, oh, I don't have time. You find yourself devoting time to read every day. Now, I gave myself that mandate that no matter how tired I was, I must commit a minimum of an hour to read every day. And that really helped me a lot. So, for example, then we're still going to work. So maybe I'm in the bus, I'm coming back home. I had a CBAP app on my phone. So even though I couldn't read a physical book, I had a CBAP app on my phone where I could just be scrolling to questions and all. And then when it got to about 60 days before the exam, maybe 5 weeks before the exam, I started simulating constantly. And that was where watermarks really helped me. Now, is watermarks question the same as what you find in the exam? Absolutely not.
No.
But is it going to drill you to read, because they lift questions from Babok? That's what watermark does. So if you go through the watermark, case scenarios and all of that, they are lengthy, they are difficult, but that's exactly what you're going to say in the exam in terms of the concept, the format. So it helps you to drill further into the Babok book. Now, another thing I want to say is, no matter the book you're reading, I know Babok can be very boring as a starter, but no matter the book you're using, please always come back to Babok. Really, that's the best place to be. But if you feel that you're finding it difficult to understand how Babok has, arranged everything, you can use like the study guides, even Watermark has a study guide. Then there's another study book like that, A lot of materials are out there. By the end of the day, you want to come back to your Babok. So that was my own strategy. I simulated so well until the day of exam. And then when I got into the exam, in fact, at the point I was hot because, it was really, they'll put the first 10 or 20 questions are the toughest. So they're going to use that to distract you. And they're like, I don't know. I remember removing my jacket. I was wearing a sleeveless, actually. I didn't care. It was a guy proctoring me. But at that point, the pressure on me, oh no, I have to make it. So don't be discouraged. If you strategize well, CBAP is one of the exams you're going to ace. I tell all the people that I've spoken to, that I've coached, I tell them, don't even worry about failing it. You're not going to fail. If you've strategized properly, if you have the right, know the technique. Now, there's no shortcut to it. You have to commit some things to memory. There's nothing like, oh yeah, I understand how it works. Because they're going to ask you some questions that what they're just asking you for is, so what's the input into another process? So if you didn't know that was an input, how would you understand the question? Even though they're not going to ask you any direct question. The whole 120 questions are all case scenarios. So yeah, to just summarize everything, just strategize well. Know what works for you. Know when is the best time to read. Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? Is it in the evening? But you have to be disciplined. And then you have to commit some things to memory. If you can do all that, most especially being disciplined, I'm sure you'll be fine with your exam. You're just going to go in, smile, come out, you're good. Yeah. So I'll say in summary, that was my own strategy. I used study group to propel me to read. And then I had a plan of reading every day. So I had my app, I had the physical book. I'm not too good with online books. I like my book physically. I want to, mark them, yeah. And then I went into the exams and then I was successful. So that was actually my own strategy, what I did. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any questions before we go into the session.
Does anyone have any question or strategy or about everything that she just talked about before we jump into this knowledge area? I don't think no question, so we can just so let's go ahead.
Okay, so again, we're here, and what are we discussing this evening? It's on requirement analysis and design definition. But as a one of the ways in which I try to make things simplified for people is I try to ensure that you have that holistic view of what we're talking about. I'm not just concerned about that RADD knowledge area we want to discuss today, but I want to be sure that you really understand the entire concept, how it all fits into each other. So what we're going to be doing will be, we'll do a bit of introduction to the knowledge area. We'll go into the knowledge tags. After each of the knowledge, into each of the knowledge area, we're going to have a quiz that we do. It's via a poll. So I'm going to launch some polls. You go in and then you do it. Then we move into the next knowledge area and that like that. If you have any questions, feel free to buzz in or not. Now, before we start, we're going to start with a pre-poll question, just to jiggle our brains on, okay, what do I know? Because really you have to understand the structure of BABOK if you want to ace the exam. When I say structure, when someone taps you and say, hey, Danielle, how many techniques do we have in BABOK? You should know it. Hey, how many competency skills did they discuss in BABOK? You should be able to tell me that number. So we're going to start with that right now, and then we'll discuss that before we go into the RADD session. So the first poll has 10 questions, and we'll have 5 minutes to just, tell me your answers. So I'm launching the poll right now. Can we all see it on our screen? If you can
yes,
see it, give me it. Okay, good, yes. Good. So let's go ahead. Why not let's answer these questions to start with. We have 10 questions there, and we have I'll give you just about 3-4 minutes, or maximum of 5 minutes to get through it. Once you're done, just submit.
How do you pick the answer?
What did you say, Chi?
I'm looking at it. It's showing me 7465. There's no place to click. Are you all seeing it?
No, you won't be able to say it, Chinyere. You are a host. Yeah. So don't participate, please. Yeah.
I was looking forward to answering the
question. But is everyone okay? Is everyone okay? Can you see? Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm out of it. Oh, Lord.
No, you don't have to do it, Chinyere. Yeah.
I just wanted to find.
Okay, one person has submitted. We have 2 persons submitted. Okay, we'll wait for the others. Okay, we have 4 submissions. We have 5 submissions. We have 6 submissions. Okay, we have less than 1 minute, and then would end the poll so that we can all review the answers. I mean, we're going to launch the answers, the results, so that we all see how, you know, we perform. Okay, 7 submissions, 8. Okay, we have 2 more. Okay, 1 more. Okay. One more. Should we wait or should we move on? Okay, it's 4 minutes now, so I'm going to end the poll in 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you. So let's see how we all did. So I'm going to share the results. Can we all see the results on our screen? Okay, so let's start with how many knowledge areas are there in BABOK? Fantastic, we all got it, so thumbs up. We have the strategy analysis, business analysis, and business analysis, planning and monitoring. We have elicitation and collaboration. We have the RAD, we have the solution evaluation. I think I missed one, requirements life cycle management.
Yes.
Those are the 6. Good, thank you. What is the total number of tasks associated with all the knowledge area in BABOK? Some said 28, some said 30. The correct answer is actually 30. So you might need to go back and master it. We have 30. I won't be able to tell you all because because of time. How many techniques are there in BABOK? Wow, 50. That's great. That's great. Okay, here comes the tricky one. Tasks in BABOK are presented in a particular format. How many elements are there?
Shola, your screen is not moving. Your screen is frozen.
Oh, really? Is it moving now?
You're not moving the
you
questions.
You have to move it yourself.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I did. I had to move it myself.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm scrolling on my own end here and it's scrolling.
I'm scrolling on my own as well, yeah.
It's fine here.
Okay, so I'll just call on the question. Oh, okay, I see. So the number 2, we've talked about number 2, 3, straightforward. Let's go to 4, question 4. The tasks in BABOK are represented in a particular format. How many elements are there in that format? Just 2 persons picked 8. Majority picked 5. Okay, so tell me, let's talk about this. What do we think they are talking about?
That's my question. I'm not sure.
I wasn't sure.
Okay, so
description.
Exactly. So that's what they are talking about.
Oh.
Now, let me give you a clue to it. Dog is pet. Dog, D-O-G, is pet. So if you count those letters, that's the 8. So when we say dog is pet, it helps me. I deal with mnemonics a lot. I mean, it helps me to commit things to memory. When you say dog is pet, what is the D? The D is the description. What is the O? The O is the output. It's not in any particular order. It's just for you to remember what that framework is. What is the G? The G is guidelines and tools. What is the I? The I is input. What is the S? S is stakeholders. What is P? P is purpose. What is E? E is element. And what is T? Techniques. Thank you. So can we say that it's 8? Okay.
Yeah,
so
should
that's,
they not have double T? What about the task? Task is not included here.
no, it's not. No.
Oh yeah, the task is the higher one. Sorry.
It's the higher ones.
The
Now,
higher, yeah.
and it's the tax that we're actually talking about.
Talking
We're
about
breaking the tax in. So the tax actually has a format in BABOK. That format in which they represent the tax is what we call dog is pet. If you remember that, you can't, now that we've put it in a mnemonic, I'm sure you can never forget it again. Okay, so let's go to the next question. How many core concepts do we have in business analysis core concept model? Okay, so one person said 5, another person said 6. The correct answer is 6. C square, S square, and V. That's my own mnemonic when I did my exam, and I've not forgotten. C squared, S squared, N, and V. So the 2C is what? Context and what? Who remembers the second one?
Change.
Change. Thank you. This S square is what? Stakeholders and what?
Solutions.
Solutions. The N is what? Need. And the V is what? Value. So when you hear core concept model, it's 6. We're talking about 6 things. Okay, let's go to the next one. Question 6 talks about underlining competencies is categorized into how many groups? So who can tell me?
6.
Can you name the 6?
Analytical and problem solving.
1.
Interaction.
Communication
skills.
2. I mean, let's open up.
Behavioral characteristics.
Interaction. There's someone mention interaction.
Tools and technology.
Good.
Business knowledge.
Good.
I think we've gone through all of them. There's interaction skills, there's tools and technology, there's communication skills, there's business knowledge, there's behavioral characteristics, and there's analytical thinking and problem solving.
Okay. Just a minute, I'm trying to... Okay, yeah. So she's mentioned that I'm trying to open my BABOK electronic calculator in case we need to reference it at any point in time. Yeah, so she mentioned it correctly. We have 6. So for those of us that said 4, that means we're missing something. So we need to go back and really commit to memory some. Now, remember, there is no direct question in the exam, but they're going to coin those questions in a way that if you don't even know they exist, you're not going to know that's the answer to the question, Okay, so let's move on. 7. Yes, please.
Can we put on our cameras, please? If you can, I really appreciate if you can put on your cameras. Thank you. Especially when you're answering a question, so that we can see who is talking. All right, thank you.
When you put on your cameras, I mean, I know that sometimes we can't, but it helps us to connect more. You know always talking, nothing more really. Yeah.
Session, and when you put on the camera, we connect more. And when you are talking, others are able to relate with what you are saying. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Chi. Okay, so the next question, question 7, talks about what is the total number of skills discussed in the overall underlying competence. Remember, we said we have 6 categories, but how many skills do we have discussed in those 6 areas? The correct answer is actually 29. Now, I had my mnemonics that I used for it as well. So, I remember the first one, analytical thinking, I think I did pot is tea or something. Another one I did biosym. I just looked for things to just make me commit to memory what I was, dealing with. So if you don't know the 29 skills, it's good you go read it up. So at least we have 3 people here so if you said 15 or 25, then we might be missing something. The correct answer is 29. Okay. Number 8, how many perspectives are discussed in BABOK? It's actually 5. Do we all know the 5? Some people said 6 and some people said 3. It's actually 5. So who can tell me the 5? I know we started with agile. Good.
Business intelligence.
Business intelligence. Business process.
Good. Good. That's 4.
Information technology.
Information
technology.
Yes. I think we have one more. Well, we have mentioned the 5. I think we have one more. Okay.
Did we say process management?
Yes, someone said about business process. And so please look through it. We have 5. The correct answer is 5. Now let's go to question 9. How many types of requirements are discussed in requirement classification schema in the BABOK? I didn't expect anyone was going to miss this. So, I mean,
I have questions about this. I'm sure I forgot what I wrote, but anyways, I'll let you answer it first, because for me, I was confused based on the subset of like a particular kind of requirement. So how do we count that?
So really the classification is 4. 4. And which is what? Business requirements, stakeholders requirements, solutions requirement, and transition requirement. However, the solution requirement is now broken down further into 2 categories: functional requirements and non-functional requirements. Any other question? Are we all clear on that?
Yeah, so if they ask this in this kind of scenario, just going to name the 4 main ones.
The 4 main ones, those are the major classifications. Now, because the functional or non-functional actually speaks to the solution you are trying to develop. So that's under solution requirements. You can also check BABOK. Everything I'm saying is BABOK based. I mean, reference. Yeah, I'm a BABOK girl. So, yeah. Okay. So one more, and then we are done with this pre-poll. The generic list of stakeholders in BABOK includes how many roles? So 4 people picked 11, and that is the correct answer. So do you know who those 11 people are? We have the business analyst, we have the domain subject expert, we have the implementation subject expert, we have the operation support, we have the project manager, we have the sponsor, we have the regulator, we have the tester. Have I missed any?
Customer, supplier.
End user, customer, and supplier. Thank you. Yeah. So those are the 11 roles BABOK, general. I mean, categorized all this kind of, in the back. Now I'm saying this. Do you know why we are going by BABOK really tonight? Because I know a lot of us want to go for our certification. So it's not about how we do it in our workplaces. It's about the book of knowledge for business analysis. So we have to follow strictly what the book of knowledge, has told us, even though in some cases we might not agree with it. Exam is going to test you on what the book of knowledge says. Okay, so having said that, we'll just dive into our session for today. Can we all see my screen? Okay, so we move on to the next slide, introduction to the knowledge areas. So any question before we go on about the pre-poll, anything that looks weird or you don't agree with? We're all good. Okay, thank you. Chinyere, please, you can help me monitor the reason. If you want to stop me along the lines, feel free to just interrupt, ask your question, or you just raise your hands, and then Chinyere would help me to watch whoever has his or her hands raised.
Well,
okay, so
I think if no one has any question, just drop it in the chat.
Okay, go on.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you, Chinyere. What did you say?
If anyone has any question, please drop in the group chat. I will read it to her.
Okay.
So I will be monitoring it.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Okay, so really we're talking about requirement analysis and design definition. So we are going to be looking at the tact and the practices that a business analysis perform, to structure and organize requirements. Okay, so what are we really talking about? Where does this come in on the whole, business or business analysis. Where does it come in? How do we fit in? How do we fit in this RAD? So this is what this diagram is actually trying to make us see. Okay, so, you know, you come in with your need. Oh yeah, business needs something. You know, you're coming from the strategy analysis. Oh, we need to improve things more, the way we're doing things. That's where the change comes from. It becomes a need. All that is captured in the strategy analysis. And then you're just looking at something that is potential because you've not actually done the work to make it a solution. And then you move into the requirement analysis and design definition. This is where you do, you know, where your requirement and design come into play. So by saying that, what do we really mean? You don't just jump into requirement analysis and design definition. Remember, as you were coming from strategy analysis, there is a need, a change needs to be made. You go into planning mode, which is your business analysis, planning and monitor. Okay, how do we want to go with this? How do we want to make this change? Okay, what's our plan? What our governance plan? Okay, what's going to be our stakeholder, you know, engagement plan? How are we going to, you know, whatever plans you need to do, then you need to make it in the BA planning and monitoring. Now, once you've done that, you need something very, very important before you can proceed to your RAD knowledge area, which are your requirements, information, talk to people, review documents. How do you know what needs to be done? The information that you already have, or what people would want for the solution, or, you know, however, that's what we call elicitation and collaboration. So you elicit in whatever way, whether by observation, by interviews, by document analysis, you know, a lot of techniques that you can actually use for your elicitation and collaboration. Now, when you have that requirement, no matter how little, what form, whether it's confirmed or it's not confirmed, you can actually start some of your RAD work. Now, that is where RAD comes into play. RAD is where we mix everything together, what we've heard of the requirements. We mix them together. We try to organize it. We try to, you know, play with it, coat it with yellow, blue, everything, just so that we are sure that we are, you know, meeting stakeholder requirements. We are also meeting the business requirements. And at the end of the day, you have your requirements and your designs validated. You know, you have your designs that are ready to be pushed, you know, as your own recommendation as a business analyst. Now, after that is when we now go into solution evaluation, which we wouldn't want to, you know, talk about. I mean, that's just to say, okay, what we've done, does it work? Does it make sense? Are we maximizing value? Do we need to revise anything in it and all of that? Okay. So now the other part of this diagram just talks about when we, you know, remember the BA core concept model we talked about, change, need, solution, stakeholder, value, context. What do we mean when we say these things? So for each of the knowledge area, change will be different. Please take note. Need will be different. Solution, because you have to define them in the context of the knowledge area you're dealing with. So when we say change, we mean we want to transform the elicitation results into requirement and design. That makes sense, right? You know, for RAD. Now, when you are defining the same change in elicitation and collaboration, you're going to define it in another way that makes sense to that knowledge area. And that's what this whole thing is talking about. Need. You want to analyze the need. Like, I mean, I already talked about this. You want to make sure you are meeting the business need. You are meeting the stakeholder need. What solution? You want to define solutions, you know. And I know you can read all the stakeholder value context and all, but remember, the core concept model is unique to each of the knowledge areas. Let's move on. So this is just talking about it all: change, need, solution, value, context, stakeholder. Okay, let's do a quick one. Sometimes some people actually, you know, interchangeably use these words, requirement and design. And the truth is, it depends on what level you are in your project, because what is requirement to you might be a design to me. So we need to be sure of how we use those words. Now, when the focus is about understanding the need, then you're talking about requirements. So let's leave the titles alone. You have to understand the meaning. When the focus is about, okay, I want to understand what the need is, then you're talking about requirements. But when the focus is, you know, getting something out, like the focus is on the solution, how can we give them something that will meet their needs? Then you're talking about design. And these are just some examples, I mean, of how you use requirements and how you use design in the same, for the same kind of, you know, analogy. So for example, let's say okay, the requirement may be reduced amount of time required to pick and pack a customer order. That's a requirement. It's specific, it's about trying to address a need, trying to understand why, the need or what we need to do. And then what's the design? What's the focus of your solution? What are you trying to say? Okay, we can actually do a process model. Yeah, a process model would help you to see, okay, what the current state is. You do another process model to for the future state, because you would have identified some gaps that you actually want to take away and improve upon to give you that new process model. So if you read through these examples, it actually gives you, a broader perspective about, okay, when we say requirements, what are the examples of things we're talking about? And when we say design, what are we looking at? Oh, develop business strategy, goals and objective for a new business. And what does it really mean in terms of solution, solution focused? Can do a mock-up, or something to simulate what you're trying to provide to meet the business need. Okay, so this is just an introduction into the input-output diagram. I mean, remember our framework. Can someone tell me what the framework is, please? Framework for each of our tasks is what? I mean, what's the mnemonics?
Dog is pet.
Dog is pet.
Thank you, dog is pet. So for each of these tasks that you see here, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 4, 5, 6, they will be reviewed in the context of dog is pet. Now, this shows the overall input, the tasks that we'll be doing, and the output. Now, just a quick one. Input is you're putting in something into it. Task is, okay, the little things that we need to do. But in this case, when we are reviewing the tasks, what we need to do now becomes the elements, like the things we need to consider in a particular output. What do we get at the end of the day? Purpose, why are we doing this thing? Description is just a younger brother or sister to purpose, to say, okay, expatiate, talk more about the purpose. What are we trying to do? Stakeholders, who is going to be involved? Who has a vested interest? Who is going to be affected by this solution that we are trying to build? Which other one is that? I think that's about all. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So we're looking at the tasks. What are the tasks in which we'll be looking at in requirement analysis and design definition? I'll use RADD just to make life easy for everyone. We're talking about 6 tasks. So the first is specify. Can we even, the good thing is you should be able to say these tasks at the top of your head. I mean, if you've not committed your tasks to memory, remember in the pre-poll, we said how many tasks? 30, 30. If you don't know those 30 tasks, please commit it to memory. It will help you a lot even when you're answering questions. So for the RADD session, we have 6. We have specify and model requirement. We have verify requirement. We have validate requirement. We have define requirement architecture. We have define solution option. And then we have analyze value and recommend solution. And the beauty about it is for RADD, they all go, there's like a sequence for RADD. So if you can remember one, you should be able to get to when you analyze value. What do I mean by that? Specify and model requirement. That's when you bring in all your elicitation results, you try and, refine them, model them, put them into different categories, who said what and no. Verify requirement. Those requirements, you now go back and see, is this requirement complete? Is it concise? Is it correct? Is it unambiguous? Is it testable? After that, you go to your validation. Does this requirement actually meet the business need? Does it make sense? Does it align with our goals and strategy? Then once you've validated them, then you can now go into defining your requirement architecture, because really, you don't want to define your requirement architecture when you've not fully, it's just like effort wasted when you are, bringing in requirements into your architecture that are not validated or verified, because you might have to pull them out at the end of the day. You still need to verify and validate. Then you bring in into architecture is just a way to organize your requirements. How do you store them? How do you refine them? How do you synthesize them? And then you now go on to define your solution options. Okay, what are the options viable? Okay, I think we have solution A, B, C. Okay, what are the things we need to consider now? After looking at all your design solution option, you now move into, okay, which one is actually the best? Remember, as a business analyst, you have to make a recommendation. So that's what the whole task here is talking about. Let's move on. We've talked about the framework, dog is pet. I'm sure we all know that now, dog is pet. Okay, we move on. So we'll look at the first task, specify and model requirements. What is the input? Using our dog is pet. So this is actually like a small version of dog is pet. Some things are not included, but I think we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things inside of, as part of dog is pet that is here in this input output diagram. Okay, so let's go on. Specify a model requirement. What is the purpose and description? I mean, let's cut the long story short. What are we trying to do in specify? Yes, please.
To interrupt someone, Jaden is saying, could you go back to the last slide, please? Jaden, can you unmute yourself and say why you want her to go back to the last slide? You must have a question,
blessing.
Right?
It's blessing.
Oh, a blessing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's just my son's name on the computer.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's where you were talking about the dog is pet. Not this one, not this slide. The one, yes, and it's just for me. I just want to take a screenshot.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're back to, are we enjoying the class or is boring you already? Let me know. Okay, good. Okay, so let's move on. Specify a model requirement. What are we trying to do when we say specify a model requirement? Honestly, what we are doing is we are taking the elicitation results. We want to analyze them. We want to synthesize them. We want to refine them. We want to recategorize them in a way that would help us get our requirement and design. Nothing more. Now, remember, when the focus of the specifying and modeling activity is on understanding the need, the output is referred to as what? Requirement. And when the focus is on a solution, the outputs are referred to as what? Designs. Okay, let's move on. What's the input? I'm sure we already know that by now. The only input into the specify and model requirements are the elicitation results. Elicitation results, which you got from which knowledge area? Who can tell me?
Elicitation, collaboration.
Chapter 4.
Thank you. Good. Elicitation and collaboration. So that's the way you map things together. You have to be able to map everything together, what's going on. At every point in time, when you're in a specific knowledge area and something is popping out to you, you should be able to say, oh, where's that coming from, actually? So I'm glad we all said elicitation and collaboration. Now, modeling activity can begin with any elicitation result, like we said earlier, whether it's confirmed or it's not confirmed, and may lead to even more clarification. Sometimes when you're specifying a model, remember, we're analyzing, we're synthesizing, and if you're not clear about something, you ask, you talk to your stakeholders. Oh, I saw that you said the functionality must bring in this, that, the X, Y, Z. What do you mean? Because remember, we don't want our requirements to be ambiguous. That's not understandable. People can't relate with it. Also, elicitation and modeling may occur sequentially, whether iteratively or concurrently. So you might be doing, in fact, most times you are still doing more elicitation and collaboration, and yet you've already started RADD. And you know the way it works in Babok. As long as the input required for a task to begin is available, you can actually start the task, irrespective of the knowledge area that task belongs to. So for example, I want to start specifying a model requirement. The input is elicitation result. If I don't have elicitation results, I cannot start that task. So let's have that in mind. It doesn't matter how it's arranged in Babok, as long as you have the input for that task, if it's available, then you can actually start the task. Okay, let's go on. What are the elements? Now, the element I call marry, M-A-R-R-I, marry. So you model, I'm telling you all the mnemonics I use for my exams, so I still remember some, it's fading away gradually. So I call them marry. Model requirements, you analyze them, you represent requirement attributes, and then you implement appropriate level of abstraction. Now, when we say model requirement, what are we talking about? There are two things that really pops out of modeling. It's either it's in a diagram form or it's like in matrix form, whichever works. I mean, either tables or you have your, process model or something that you have. That's what we mean by modeling requirement. Just put it in a form that makes people, makes it more relatable when people see it. Analyze requirement. What are we analyzing requirements for? Okay, you're trying to see, okay, are there any changes? Are there any missing components? Is this what the stakeholder said? Are we missing something? Are there some constraints or assumptions that we should be considering? Analysis, just purely analysis, just trying to mine the elicitation result to be sure that you can get, you have a good data. Okay, represent requirements and attributes. What are we talking about? Characteristics of requirements and then design quality. Now, before I go into characteristics of requirements, I'll go that into later. Let's just talk about the implementing the appropriate level of abstraction. Level of abstraction just means that if you're talking to stakeholder A, you have to talk to stakeholder A in a way that stakeholder A will understand. For example, when we are going for executive meetings or with the director, I'm sure we all hear about directors don't want too many stories, just give them a one-pager. They want to see everything on a one-pager. Now, you going in as a business analyst and you're bringing in a 10-page document, come on, you've lost the guy. So you need to be able to determine your audience. Who are your audience? Okay. And remember where this would have been defined. Who remembers where we would have defined this? Which of our plans would have helped us to know how to relate with stakeholder A, B, or C?
Stakeholder engagement.
Stakeholder engagement.
Thank you. You would have, because really you have to understand and know your stakeholders, know how you're going to communicate with them. Now, those plans would help you here in determining, the level of abstraction. Okay, maybe you're going to stay on level 1. Or maybe this stakeholder actually likes more details. You're going to go deep. Oh, this stakeholder doesn't like story, just like the, highlights. This is what the level of abstraction means. Now, let's talk about the characteristics of design quality. I have a name on it, but it really doesn't make sense, but I have to just put it in my head. FACCUT, F-A-C-C-U-P-C-U-T, FACCUT, whatever. You might have a better name on it, but it helped me to remember. What are we talking about? Your requirements must be atomic, they must be complete, they must be consistent, they must be concise, they must be visible, they must be unambiguous, testable, prioritized, and understandable. At every point in time, when you have a requirement that you have to deal with, in fact, when we talk about verifying requirements, that is exactly what we are doing. We are just trying to check the FACCUT of this requirement. If it fails any of those characteristics, then we need to do more work on it. Now, another thing we should know about is there are some things called model categories in terms of specifying and modeling requirements. Now, remember that when you want to model requirements, we're talking about diagrams, we're talking about matrices. So sometimes when you're talking about diagrams, maybe in terms of a model or something, we have about 5 categories that are being used. What do we mean? Let's say we're trying to model requirements that has to deal with people and roles. What kind of model, what kind of representation can we make that it will make sense to people? Now, on top of my head, if I hear people and roles, the technique I will bring, and what technique can I use? The technique I'll bring is what? Organizational modeling. To help me to see people and their roles. What other technique can we think of? I'm sure it's just there, but does it make sense to you? Stakeholder lists, map, and personas. Remember, what we're talking about is people and roles. So as a business analyst, I'm going into a presentation and I want people to understand something about business and role. And I sit down and think about, Chinyere, can you please mute whoever is not on mute, please? Chinyere, you can actually mute. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, you can actually pick techniques to help you present that information in a better way. That's what we're talking about when we say modeling requirements. And these are the modeling categories we have. Another one for people and roles is maybe roles and permission matrix. Now, let's move away from that. Let's talk about rationale. What is rationale? Why we are doing something. So you want to do a presentation as a business analyst, and you want to share why you are embarking on this project. What comes to mind to you? What technique comes to mind that you can use to model that?
How about decision modeling?
Good. Decision modeling. All these, your cause and effect diagrams. Why? You have to look for the techniques that would help you. Scope modeling, business model, root cause analysis. That's a very good one, actually. When you talk about why, you should remember root cause analysis. Now, let's talk about activity flow, something flowing into, if you don't even remember anything, you should remember data flow diagram, data flowing in. So this model category is actually helping us to model our requirements. At any point in time, if you want to model a requirement and make a presentation to your stakeholders or something, you should know the right tech. You cannot be talking about people and role and then you're using root cause analysis. You cannot be talking about capability and then you're bringing organizational modeling. Okay. Any question on this? And then we have data and information. That's where you have your data dictionary, data flow diagram, glossary, state modeling, interface. And if you really look at it, you don't need to cram it. It's something that relates to those categories. People and roles, organizational modeling, stakeholder list, talks about people, you know. Any question before we move on from this slide? Okay. Now let's go to guidelines and tools. Now, guidelines are tools just means what are the things that we need to consult to help us perform this task very well. That's what guidelines and tools mean, something to guide us in that particular task in which we are undergoing. So we have modeling notations. It could be your BPMN, it could be your, which other ones do we use? All these saying. There are lots of modeling notations actually. It could be your modeling tools, you know, your software, maybe Visio or Lucid Charts. I mean, whatever you need that helps you get the work done. It could be a requirement architecture. I mean, how do you understand the relationship between them? Do you have something that helps you, you know, maybe you need to consult an ITIL book or something, you know. RLTM tools is just requirement lifecycle management tools. Is it your JAMA? Is it your JIRA? You know, and then solution scope. Solution scope for the project you're doing actually helps to keep you within boundary. You don't want to move out of the boundary of the work you're actually doing. So that's what guidelines and tools helps us to achieve. Okay, so now let's go to the techniques now. For the purpose of this class, we won't delve into each technique because we have lots of techniques for each of the tasks. However, towards the end, we'll pick some few techniques and then go into them in detail. Now, I would like to say this. For your exams, please ensure that you read, you know, there's a technique part in the BABOK. In fact, it has lots of pages and we have for the whole 50 techniques. Ensure that you don't cram. Don't try to cram the techniques. No. You don't need to commit to memory your techniques. However, you need to understand how those techniques works. Trust me, if you understand how those techniques works, whenever any question is posed, you know, to you or, you know, thrown at you and say, oh, what technique do you use would help, you know, Shola do this job? When they give you the option, you can use elimination method to take out the ones that do. I mean, when they're saying, okay, Shola is trying to show the stakeholders how the solution will work. They now put in the question to say, oh, what technique do you think the stakeholder will? They now put organizational modeling. Of course, you know that's not. Or they put glossary. Come on, that doesn't show your stakeholder anything. But that knowledge comes from when you study the techniques in depth. Have a very good knowledge of those. Don't cram. Don't try to cram. I mean, cramming all the 50 in all of the tasks, come on. I didn't do that. If you can do that, oh, fantastic, but I don't think it's necessary. However, if you have a good knowledge of the techniques and how it works, you'll be fine. So for this specify and model requirements, we have lots of them. We have acceptance and evaluation criteria. What is acceptance? I mean, just bringing out conditions in which you're going to accept or not accept a requirement and all. So it shows evaluation criteria, the attributes and all. We have business capability analysis. We have business model canvas. Business model canvas is just something that helps to show how your organization delivers and creates values, or, you know, to your customer. That's all. How do we relate with them? And we have a lot of things in key activities, key resources, key partnership, key, you know, all of these things. I mean, you will love it. Take time to go through your techniques. Go through it like twice or thrice, and then it will give you a better understanding of its application. We also have business rule analysis, you know. We have concept modeling. That's just English, actually. Verb now, this is the word we'll be using so that, you know, you don't want confusion within your stakeholders and all. You have data dictionary where people can refer to understand, you know, how the meaning of the data you've used, or maybe in some cases we call it metadata. We also have data modeling. When you're modeling your data, you know, you want to visualize how your data will be used in the solution. Decision modeling, those are rationale, functional decomposition, glossary. Glossary is just, you know, okay, there's someone waiting, let me just admit. Glossary is just defining your terms. Interface analysis, how different processes work together. Non-functional requirement analysis, that describes majorly the quality of the system, the service quality of the system. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. You see, lots of techniques. We have process modeling. We all know this. I mean, which you use your Visio for. Process modeling helps you to capture the current state, know how it works. Then you can review with your stakeholders. What are the improvement opportunities that we can do? And then you develop a new one that shows the to be, as your future state. Prototyping, it helps to visualize things. Okay, this is the mock-up of how the solution is going to work. Oh, we want to develop an app that would help us, trace our movement within the house. This is how it's going to be, that's what prototyping actually helps. It helps stakeholders to see what the process or solution is going to look like. Roles and permission metrics, very important. So you want to define roles, permission, who does what. That's where your CRUD, your create concept comes in. I'm sorry I'm going through this very fast, but really we can talk about this all day. So I don't want us to, yes, please.
Someone is asking, why are some black and some are orange? The bullet.
Good question. I was waiting for that. So the black ones or underlined ones are mostly the recommended ones for those tags, the most widely used ones.
Oh.
It doesn't mean other ones are not used, and all these things are subjective anyway. But when you talk about specified model requirements, some technique stands out. So some textbooks will tell you, oh, if you don't know anything about techniques for this particular task, you must know these techniques because it will help you. So when they call you at a go, hey, give me something on, there are some go-tos for you. So that's the difference actually. So some are not, I'm not saying they're more important than others, but they are mostly recommended.
So
thank you for that question. Yeah.
It was Danielle that asked.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Danielle. Okay. Non-functional requirement analysis. This is talking about the service quality of your solution. I think about more than 10 or 12 things under that. And that you also see in your technique session. You have availability, reliability, a lot of the maintenance, Yeah, I mean, you have to read the technique section, please. Process modeling, prototyping, roles, and okay, we've talked about root cause analysis, also very important. The why, where's it coming from? Where's it going to? Why did we do this? Scope modeling helps you to, organize your scope within the boundaries of the solution in order to meet your business needs. Sequence diagram describes the interactions of the actors in the system, their order and their interaction. State modeling, use case and scenario, also very important. User stories, stakeholder list, map or personnel, organizational modeling, data flow diagrams. Okay, do we have any question on techniques? Do you have one technique that you really don't understand that you want me to really talk about before we move on?
Yeah, I'll say sequence and state diagram. I know they are different, but I always find it very confusing. Yeah, so sequence diagram and state diagram.
Okay, thank you.
Offering. I need to change my name here. My name is Offering.
Oh,
Offering. Yeah, it's putting my middle name initial like Rachel and my last name Eramoselli.
Okay, so we call you Rachel.
Yeah, or you can call me Offering actually. Yeah. How do I change outfit? Let me change it.
I've changed it for you. Don't worry.
She's
okay,
changed
perfect. Thank you.
So what I was going to say is that as you are explaining the state diagram, if you can also compare it with state modeling, I think that will help. State diagram.
We don't have state that. We have state modeling, not diagram.
Okay, yes, state modeling and state modeling.
It's state modeling, not state. No, it's just once. Do we have it twice? Scope modeling.
Scope modeling. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really, look at it this way. When we're talking about state modeling, it's just talking about transitioning of a particular entity from one state to the other. Now, if you look at that state modeling, on top of my head, I think we have state diagram, we have state transitioning, and then we have one more. I mean, if you have your Babok, please, you can just reference that. We have about one more. Now, what does it do really? It's just saying, okay, you know what? I want bread. I'm a lover of bread. Coincidentally, I am actually. I love bread. So I want to eat bread. That's me as a stakeholder saying, but how do we get to that bread? Now, flour is a state. Butter is another state. So flour is just the powdery one, right? You do some kind of modeling there. You move into another state, which is where you've mixed the flour with the butter, with the egg. That's another state. Another state is the bread itself, where it's now formed. So whenever you hear anything moving from one phase to the other, the same thing, not different, the same one entity, moving from point A to point B to point C, just know that you're talking about state modeling. You're trying to model a particular requirement in different states. Now, if you look at the description, the visual representation of different states of solution based upon events throughout the solution life cycle. Now, does the bread example make sense to you now? If you read this and then read that. Because really, at different points in time in your elicitation and collaboration, or in your requirements refining or synthesizing, your requirements will be looking different. So maybe the first time you got your requirement was all about flour. You didn't understand. By the time you made more clarification, you discovered that we can't stay on flour. We have to move to butter. That's really the correct requirement. Oh, you know what? I think it's actually bread. So your requirements can keep changing that way. And then a good technique to use to visualize that is the state modeling. Now, when you're talking about sequence, where's the sequence one? Let's see. Sequence diagram was one in which I didn't really like. But I mean, I just had to, let's understand what they're talking about, because you see some lines, asynchronous and synchronous. What are they talking about? The only thing I got from this is when is it a good time for me to know that I really need sequence diagram? Okay. Number one, you have different actors within the system. Actors and the system. Now, they are interacting with each other. Now, not only interacting with each other, the timing is very important. So, you know, for state modeling, you're talking about one entity. For sequence diagram, you are getting into something that has multiple entities. It could be an actor, it could be a system. You are trying to understand the reaction, their interaction rather. So that word there says describes the interaction of actors in a system, and the order, that order is really what makes it stand out. So when you see questions, when you see when you're trying to represent how different actors interact with a system at one particular order, then you would want to be thinking about using sequence diagram. For example, let's say, okay, what happens to a disgruntled customer that calls in and complains? Okay, the customer calls in. Where does the call go? Now, if you check your bubble, you see some lines calling here, going there. So let's say the call goes to customer care. The customer care picks it up, and then the customer care doesn't really satisfy them. Where does the call go? And at what time? Is it after 20 minutes? Timing is very important in sequence diagram. Is it that, okay, let's say maybe after 30 minutes or 30 seconds, the call automatically gets diverted to a supervisor. Okay, what if you call and supervisor is not picking up, and the call returns to, or, you know, it just shows different actors within the system and their interactions and the order. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. Any other question on technique before we move on to stakeholders? Okay, so what stakeholders do we have to consult when we're talking about specifying and modeling requirements? Any stakeholder, actually, any. Now, this makes sense to me because remember, when we're doing elicitation and collaboration too, it's any stakeholder that we consult. Is that any or all? For most of the elaboration and elicitation and collaboration area. Same thing for specifying and modeling requirement, because really, if you need to clarify requirement, you still have to go to each of the source and go clarify that requirement, whether it's a document you reviewed or you spoke to a stakeholder and all of that. So any stakeholder can actually be involved in the specify and model requirement. Now, business analysts may choose to perform the task themselves, or, and then separately package and communicate the requirements to stakeholders for review and approval. They might choose to invite, or they might choose to require, depending on what the needs are for the RADD session. Okay, no, I mean, some key information to just take note is, you know, the current states, the desired state, what are the gaps, because really that's what we are doing in the specifying and modeling requirement. We want to be sure that all our requirements fulfill the right characteristics, they are correct, they are concise, they are visible, they are testable, and all of that. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So at the end of the day, what are we talking about? Oh, sorry.
Daniel is saying, I'm not sure I understand what that note means. Which note are you saying?
On the previous slide, when it said you can do it yourself or you can get someone else to do it, and I'm not sure what they mean by
just
that.
A minute. Just a minute.
You're going back. You're going to
right there.
About this one.
Yeah.
Yes. We're talking about this one. Yeah. Oh, so what it means is when you're talking about who, remember we're talking about dog is pet. Under dog is pet, we are talking about the S now, which is the stakeholders. Now the question is, which of the stakeholders do we consult? So at the face of when I'm doing specify and model requirements, I can be working on my own. If I think I need 2 or more persons to clarify some things, I bring them into a meeting. If I think it's I want to do a workshop, I bring everybody into the meeting. So it depends on the activity you're doing. There is no way at some point you are not doing those tasks yourself. You know, you also need to know what the gaps are before you bring in people for further clarification. So it can be that phase where you alone, and that's why they said any stakeholder can be involved. It can be that phase where you alone are doing that, you're doing the specify and model requirement, trying to clarify things. It might be at that stage where you need to bring in 2 more people. It can even be a focus group. It can be a workshop where you invite everyone at once to say, hey guys, we need to all talk about this. Maybe you have conflicting information or requirements that are not consistent, that are countering each other, conflicting each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to the next one. I mean, and at the end of the day, what are we going to get in this? Requirements that are specified and modeled. Now, any specified modeled requirements is any combination of requirements or design in the form of text, matrix, or diagram. Okay, quiz time. Are we ready? I think I have 4 questions for us for this particular, but this is going to come one after the other. So we have just about 30 seconds. Just click the answer and submit so we don't stay too long on it. Okay, so the first one, I've launched it. 30 seconds, I'm going to end the poll. I think 30 seconds is even way too much for us. I'm going to reduce it to 15 seconds for the next one. But I'll wait 30 seconds this time around. Great. Let's see. Okay. Let me share the results. Can we all see the results? Can we all see the results? Okay, great.
Yes,
great.
yes.
Great. Okay, so 9 people picked requirement, 1 person picked design. Okay, the correct answer is requirement. Remember, when the focus of specifying and modeling activity is on understanding the need, the output is referred to as requirement. Now, when do we say the output is design? Can someone tell me, please? When do we say it's design? When do we use design?
When the focus is on solutions.
Thank you. When the focus is on solution, then we say design. Okay, so let's go to the second one. You have 15 seconds, please. Okay, I think I'll increase it back to 30. 15 is too harsh. Sorry. I'll take it back to 30. It's fine. I'm not rushing you guys. Please take your time, read the question, understand the question, and then answer. I'll leave it at 30 seconds. So we have 1 more second, and that is it. Okay, so I'm going to share the results. Can we all see the results? Yes. All of the following are techniques that can be used to specify or model requirements, except for which one? Now, this is where your elimination method comes into play. Sometimes you might not really know it all, but if you can find out, if you can, try to, if you understand all your techniques, then the elimination method becomes very easy for you. For example, if I look at the option like work breakdown structure is not a technique. So that automatically becomes my answer. I don't even need to look further. Once I say work breakdown structure, no way, that's not part of my 50 techniques. So whether stake diagram is part of it or not, I'm not going to bother myself about it. Whether organizational model is part of it, I'm not going to bother. So when you look out for options, please look at those options and say, which one is looking funny, because they're going to trick you. Yeah. So in this case, work breakdown structure is not a technique. The technique that is very close to work breakdown structure is what? Who knows that? Very close to, I mean, it's the same concept.
Functional decomposition.
You guys are fantastic. I mean, yeah, functional decomposition, that's the word. If I'd seen functional decomposition, then I should be worried that, oh, which one is not part of? Yeah. But remember, they're not going to ask you these direct questions in the exam. It's not going to be this direct. They're going to present a case scenario to you, and then they want you to now answer which one is, belongs to the group or not. Okay, that's fine. Let's move to the next one. 30 seconds, start now. This one is tough, Abby. Nobody has answered. Okay. Okay. I'll give you more time. I want more people to answer. Don't worry. I mean, we're all learning, right? I don't know it all too. So please feel free. I want more people to answer, even though it's past 30 seconds, but it's okay. We have just 5 people. Okay. I'm going to give us more time. I want you to read the question well. These are the kind of questions you're going to see on your exam.
Exactly.
Okay, 7 people. If I can have 3 more people, okay, 8, yeah. 9, thank you. 10. Okay, let's show the results. This is tricky. It's not a direct question anymore. Do you see how it rolls? Like when it was direct, everybody was like, oh yeah, it's this. Oh yeah, it's that. Now it's no longer that. And trust me, this is the kind of question you're going to see for your 120 questions. There is no direct question, no. Except if they change the syllabus or something, the style tomorrow. But from everyone that I've written, it's strictly case scenario for the whole 120. Now let's go into this. Now, when you read a question, you need to ask yourself, what are they talking about? Where are they referencing in BABOK? What comes to mind when I see this question is they're talking about modeling, specifying and modeling required. If you have your BABOK, you can open to it. Now, when they were talking about specifying and modeling requirement, part of the first element talked about, understanding the scope, what needs to be done. And the second one is when you understand, what do? You decompose. So tell me, if you didn't know the element, how would you know the next thing that you're supposed to pick? Do you see where it becomes tricky? Elements are very important. Very, very important. When you're studying, for your certification, you need to know your elements. Now, the correct answer here is decompose business analysis information into components. When you now decompose, you now explicitly represent the requirement. Now, really, can you represent without decompose? You have to ensure that you decompose first, into it. Remember, we want our requirement to be what? Can you tell me the characteristics that speaks to making sure that a requirement is, is well decomposed? Who knows?
Atomic.
Atomic, thank you. That's beautiful. You see how we are linking everything together? It has to be atomic. If your requirement is not atomic, then you've not decomposed it well enough. You don't want to do a BRD that you send to your developers and then they dump it somewhere because they don't understand what you're talking about. Okay, let's move on.
Sorry, I was going to ask you a question.
Please go ahead.
So this question that you just posted now is for which knowledge area again?
We're doing RADD. And then this is for the first task, specify and model requirement. somewhere in there when you're going through the element, it walks you through what you need to do first. You understand, you decompose, you express, you know, attributes and all of that.
So, Ike, are you done?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay. So when we say decompose, is it the same thing as analyze?
Decompose is breaking down.
Functional decomposition.
Functional, yeah, breaking down.
Because I think from what we, like, if you go to the previous slide where we had said, and I guess maybe it's how it was represented, the second element is analyze requirements.
Yes. So if you know, so these are not your major elements. There are sub elements under your element that describes how. I wish I had my Babok here. Okay, I think I do anyway. Let's see. If you go to your Babok, I'm going to show you where, I'll tell you the page and then you can go through it and understand what I'm talking about. Because it's good that we put these things into perspective so that we can understand how to attack questions in the exam. Okay. Just a minute, I'll tell you the page and then you can read up on it. I'm scrolling through my electronic one. Okay.
Try page 138 or 39. 138.
Exactly. 138 or 39. Yes, that's it.
What's the 7 points? What's
so that's 7.1.4.
Under element two, analyze requirements. BA information is decomposed into components.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, I think it's at this point that you also tell us the mnemonic again. You said it's marry, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, marry. That's for if you want to understand your elements for specify and model requirements, it's marry. You model, you analyze, you represent requirement attributes, and then you implement the right level of abstraction. Now, it is when you are analyzing, and analysis is, decomposition is part of analysis. Let me put it that
way. That was what I was trying to, that was what I asked.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Decomposition
so that was coming from.
Exactly. It's part of analysis. It's part of the analysis you do. You know, analyze.
Because I know the second one is analyze requirements. When I saw decomposition, so that's why I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, when we say decompose, I guess breaking it down, which is analyzing.
Breaking it down. Yes, yes. Okay. So it's a subset, not the main header. So don't get confused in the exam. So then you start looking for element that says decomposition. No, it's just a subset of what happens in analysis.
In analysis.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next one. And that's the last question for this knowledge area. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, we have 8 responses. Should I expect more before ending the poll? Going. Gone. Okay, let's share the results. This is interesting though. Now the trick is, whenever you see that, okay, someone is trying to uncover the solution that is to be developed, trying to visualize, trying to make you see, they're talking about prototyping. When you say interface analysis is just trying to describe the interaction that happens between different systems. It has nothing to do, its main goal is not really to help you visualize the solution to be developed. Its main goal is to help you understand the interaction, the relationship between one unit and another unit. How would they interact? Would there be any conflict? Do we need to bring in more people? Now, interface analysis helps you to add in this, let's say in the case of the stakeholders, it helps you to identify who the stakeholders are for your project. So for example, we want to design a software that will help us work. Who do we need to call up? The technical unit, the maintenance, the business unit, the health sector, an external agent, regulator. That's what interface analysis helps you to uncover you know, their interaction, who is going to be involved in this project. Its main goal is not to help you visualize the solution to be developed. So when you hear a technique that uncovers and visualizes that interface, just tricks you. The main word is uncovers and visualizes is prototyping. Okay, so that will be all for the quiz for this session. We move on to the next task, which is verify requirements. So we talked about specify and model requirement. Now we're talking about verifying requirement. This is very simple and straightforward. Verifying requirement is just that fact cut. We are trying to ensure that it's correct, it's concise, it's complete, is feasible, is atomic, is understandable, testable, unambiguous. You should be able to name those characteristics at the top of your head. Now this is the input and output diagram. Now who can tell me, when can we say that we can start this activity of verify requirements? When do we say it's safe to start that activity?
After you've specified them.
Thank you. Very simple. And you will see such case scenarios. Oh, Lisa is trying to do something. What do you think is the logical step for? Okay, so Lisa is trying to do something. Chinera is saying, no, you don't have to do it now. What do you think is the logical step? What they're just asking you is input, output, to test you to see if you know your input and your output. So really, in this case, for verify requirements, if we don't have the specified and modeled one, we cannot verify the requirements. Okay. So let's move on. What's the purpose? The two main things why we do verification is one, to ensure that it meets quality standard, and one, to ensure that it is fit for purpose. That's all. So when you hear anything about quality, just know that you see, there's a way Babok builds this thing. There's a way those questions are. They put in those keywords that they are like starters for you, like, oh, okay, this is where they're taking me to. Whichever question you see, you should be able to, now when you're doing your simulations and you go through questions, if you're not able to type back questions to where they are in Babok, then you still have a lot of work to do. It got to a point when I see questions, I know where exactly in Babok the answer should be, even though I might not know the answer. So it's not about knowing the answer, it's about knowing that, okay, I think they're talking about strategy analysis here. It's very important. So when we talk about purpose and description, we're just saying requirement and design, want to make sure it meets quality. So anytime you hear about quality, you know that you're talking about, you're verifying something, and then it's fit for purpose. Now, remember, the focus of specifying we've talked about that before. We're talking about designs and requirements, so there's really no point repeating that. So let's move on. We've talked about the input already. Specified and model requirements, yeah. Specified and modeled, yeah. Now let's go to the elements. What elements are we looking at? Remember, we've talked about this element before, right? How many are there? We have 9 of them. Characteristics of requirements and design quality, verification activities, and checklists. Now, what does it mean when we say elements, really? Elements are just the things we need to do when we are in this particular task. So when we are saying verify requirement, what are the things I need to do? Those are the things they call elements. So first is, you want to test the characteristics of this requirement that you have. Is it atomic, complete? 9 of them, do not forget. They can give you questions that will test you to see which one is supposed to be there or not. Also, you want to do some verification activities. Does it comply with regulation standard? Is it the correct modeling stuff used? Is it the correct template? Is it complete within each model? And the third one is checklist. Checklists actually help you. In fact, anytime you hear checklist, a business analyst is trying to use checklists to verify if there's any missing information and all of that. What do you think? Which task would she have performed to be able to do this? Definitely, you know the answer is specify a model requirement, because the scenario is talking about what? Verifying requirements. Those are the kind of questions you'll see. You won't see anything called name 3 elements. No one is going to ask you that. No. Okay, checklist, just to check if there's anything missing, the quality of your requirements and all of that. Okay, next slide. Guidelines, and so what are the things in which we need to, that we can use to facilitate these tasks? Talk about requirement lifecycle management tools. There are a lot of tools out there. It will help you to record, it will help you to organize, store, and share your information. So we talked about Jira, we talked about JAMA. I know there are lots in different companies use that, but that's what we mean by the requirement life management tools. Okay, let's move on. Techniques. What techniques can we use? Acceptance and evaluation criteria, item tracking, that's a very good one. Item tracking any day, anytime helps you to manage issues from start to finish. Metrics and key performance indicators, you know, it helps you to identify and evaluate the quality of your requirement based on what you've set anyway. You know, reviews, passing from one place to another, whether it's informal or formal review and all of that. Who are stakeholders? All stakeholders, remember, when you're still verifying or specifying a modeling requirement, you still need to, sometimes you need to deal with all stakeholders. Now, the business, just like we said before, it depends on the phase that you are. You might be doing it alone, you might have to bring in more people, you might bring in everyone. So depending on who is supposed to help you verify that information, we need to, you know, apply the right method and technique. Okay, now, output. We're talking about requirements and designs that are verified. Okay. Quiz time, are we ready? Any question before we go to quiz time? Any question? Okay, let's go. I mean, that was very easy. Verify requirements. We just want to ensure that it meets quality standard and then it's fit for purpose. That's all. That's all we're trying to do. Okay, so I'm launching this poll. You have 30 seconds. Okay, so I'm ending the poll now. Let's share results to see how we all did. Okay, so we have one person pick the first choice and then 8 people actually pick the last one. So yes, the correct answer is verification is a quality check and validation meets stakeholder needs. Like I said, even if you don't know what is really the answer, you can use your elimination method. I mean, for the first question, validation, even though we've not done validation, validation is not really based on requirement document. Validation speaks to stakeholder needs, business needs. Now, the second one, verification makes sure nothing is missing and validation looks for out of scope. That's totally wrong. The third one, verification looks for cohesiveness and validation is a quality check. That's wrong. It's verification that's actually a quality check. And then the last one is the correct answer. Verification is a quality check and validation meets stakeholder needs. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, so, and pulling, share results. Okay, great. We all chose self-contained. Your requirements must be atomic, self-contained, and capable of being understood independently. Okay, let's move on to the next one. 30 seconds, please. Okay, going, and gone. Okay, we're gonna end poll and share results. Okay, so let's talk about this. Which knowledge area helps us to define our business? Now, okay, let's go back. Let's take a step back. Remember, how many types of requirements do we have?
4.
4, right? Business requirement, stakeholder requirement, solution requirement, and transition requirement. Okay. The correct answer to this poll is actually solution and stakeholder requirement. But let's see. The first one, it's definitely not the answer because we have business in there. Business is done where? In what knowledge area? Business requirements are defined in what knowledge area?
Strategy.
Strategy analysis. That's it. Thank you. I mean, that's fantastic. I like the way we were just answering. It shows we've really, really gone in depth into BABOK. I like that. Now, stakeholders' requirements are defined in which of the knowledge area? It can be more than one, right? So stakeholder requirements, where do you get to relate with stakeholder requirements? Yeah.
I would say that a bit in strategy, and then you define and model them in RADD.
It could also be elicitation and collaboration.
No.
Exactly. Good. Now, when we talk about transition requirement, now transition requirement the things you don't do that in the RADD session. Those things come up more when you're moving into your solution evaluation in quotes. You know, how do you move from A to B? But in the RADD session, you are more focused on your stakeholder requirements and your solution requirement. Solution requirement is what goes into the two areas of functional requirements and non-functional requirement. Functional requirement is okay, I think we have one more for this, and then we're done. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, so and poll, let's share result, let's see. Okay, I'm glad majority picked decision modeling. That's correct. That's a rationale model category. Now, can you tell me where organizational modeling, what modeling category organizational modeling fall under? Who can help me with that? Thank you. People and roles. Okay, how about functional decomposition?
Process.
Capability.
Exactly. Thank you. Capability. That's where functional decomposition falls into. Okay. You know, when you're talking about capability, I mean, can we do this? Do we have the resources? Do we, you know, how do we, and then you can be talking about how, I mean, how you break things down. What's your capacity and then, you know, we have something called business capability, something more. In terms of technique, there's something on capability for techniques as well. Now, when you talk about state modeling, where does this fall under? State modeling, entity moving from one place to another. What type of modeling category is that?
Data
and information. Thank you. So the correct answer to this is actually decision modeling, because that's the why of the chain. Which other why of the chain do we have? Who knows? Who can tell me which other why of the chain on that rationale category?
Scope modeling.
Thank you. Another one. There's one popular one. Root cause. Thank you. Root cause analysis. Remember that slide we looked at? Very important. Understand your modeling categories, because it will help you to choose the kind of technique that you should use. Okay, so let's move on. Any question before we move to the third task, which is validate requirements? Now, when we talk about validate requirement, now remember, we're coming from specify and model requirements. We move to verification. We want to check it's correct, it's fit for purpose, you know, meets quality standards. And then we'll go to validation. Validation simply means does this align with stakeholder needs, with the business, with a strategy as a company, as an organization? That's all validation means. Even though we verified those requirements, we still need to validate them. Okay. Now, this is our normal input output diagram. The input is still specified and model requirements. So without doing that task, without having that output of requirement that are specified and modeled, we won't be able to start this particular task. Now, like we said, what are we trying to achieve? What's our purpose? What's description? We're not trying to make sure that you're aligned with business requirements. And then it supports the delivery of value. If your solution or your requirement that you have at the end of the day does not support the delivery of value, then we're just wasting time. Because at the end of the day, you develop a solution that people are going to dump because you've not validated your requirement to be sure that it actually meets what stakeholders want or it's going to deliver value for the organization. Okay. Now, please note, requirement validation is an ongoing process to ensure that stakeholder solution and transition requirements align to the business requirements and that the design satisfies the requirements. Now, this is where what becomes tricky. Validation process helps to expose stakeholders' conflicting needs and expectations. However, the point I really want to point out is, you can actually you cannot say you've completed validation when you've not completely verified all your requirements. So you can be doing everything hand in hand to say, okay, as you're verifying, you are validating, you are still verifying more. However, validation is not complete until all the requirements have been fully verified. It's something we should take note of. So if you still have verification activities pending, then definitely validation is still pending as well. Even though you might have validated some, that means you still have some that are pending. Okay. Now, what are the requirements? What are the inputs to this? We've talked about the specified and model requirements. And that's the same note I put here again. Any type of requirement and design can be, when we say any type of requirement, what do we mean? Whether it's confirmed or not, can actually, be validated. Validation activities may begin before requirements are completely verified. That was what I just explained. However, validation activities cannot be completed before requirements are completely verified. Does that make sense to us? Okay. Let's move on. Now, what are the elements we're going to be considering? What are the things we need to do to help us perform this task successfully? We're talking about identifying assumptions. I mean, new requirements, do they have precedence, the level of difficulty, you might need to do some root cause, what we're trying to do is we're trying to validate requirements. You are tying it back to the source. So you started from, which is strategy analysis. So be sure we've not deviated away. What are the risks associated with this? Have we fully captured it? Are we, do we need to do something more? Are there more improvements? Or, then you are going to define measurable evaluation criteria. Like what are going to be the metrics for this? Okay, what's going to be our baseline? Maybe that can be your target, in terms of what we want to measure the evaluation. You need to define all of these things here when you want to validate. How do you validate? What are, those are the things you consider. Then evaluate alignment with solution scope, still tying it back to where you started from. Now, do we remember where the solution scope was developed? Do you remember the knowledge area where we had the solution scope? Let me see, do I still remember? Thank you, strategy analysis. Under what task? Do you remember the task?
Define the change strategy.
Thank you. Man, you guys are way too brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I mean, the person got it right. Who was that, please? Peter?
Rita.
Oh, okay, wow. Rita, you're on fire. I mean, that's good.
On fire.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, that's it. That's all we're trying to do. If a design cannot be validated to support a requirement, then there might be a missing or misunderstood requirement, or the design must change. It has to be validated. Okay, let's move on. What are the guidelines and tools? Okay.
Someone has a question.
Okay, go on.
Can you, she said, can you explain the term element? How is Blessing, can you ask your question? I really Hello, Blessing.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
Okay. So it's something that I have always tried to understand. So, you know, when you, for example, when you talk about guidelines, you're talking about what you need, the guidance, that things that need to guide you in each of the tasks. But the elements, like what is significant about the element? What is the, that's why I said the word element. What does it really mean in the context of the whole BABOK?
So elements just simply means the steps you need to take to be able to perform that task.
Okay.
That's it.
That's all. Perfect. So
Yeah.
steps. Okay, great.
Steps, that's all.
I've
Steps.
actually, I have checked in the glossary, and that term is something I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
I totally
Good.
understand. It can be confusing, but
Thanks.
when we talk
Yeah.
about validate requirements and you talk about elements, it just means what are the things I need to do? What are the steps to take to
Okay.
ensure that my requirements are fully validated? That's all.
Yeah.
That's all element means. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let's move on. So guidelines and tools. What are the things you need to consult? What are the things you need to make reference to? Remember, because we are validating. Validation takes us back to strategy analysis. And if you look at a lot of all of these things here, we got them from strategy analysis, business objective, future state description, potential, but no, future state description, define, analyze current state, define future state. Yeah, it was from strategy analysis actually. Potential value, solution scope, it was all derived from your strategy analysis. So, everything is syncing with each other, is making sense. Guidelines and tools, the things we need to refer back to, where it all began from, which is strategy analysis. Okay, let's move on. Techniques, here we are again. Acceptance and evaluation, document analysis, risk analysis and management, metrics, financial analysis, review, item tracking. Okay, not that much.
Formulas, right?
Oh, yes. It's interesting though. Your ROIs, your payback period, your return on investment, your PV, your MPVs. It's kind of interesting, yeah.
Do you have a suggestion or basically an easier way to remember the formula?
That's tricky. Because
especially if you're not from accounting background.
I'm actually not from accounting background, but I just love accounting somehow. I don't know. Yeah. So the main trick to it is understand what those formulas mean. If you understand what they mean, like when they say present value, what do they mean? If they say return on investment, what do they mean? If they say payback period, what are they referring? If you understand those concepts, however they twist it in exam, you will be able to get through it. Now, however, you have to commit to memory your formulas. There's no other way. Now, if you ask me the formula for, I think there's one pessimistic 6 plus PMO, there's one PMO over 6 question. That's the way I learned that one now. Just a PMO, project management office. Okay, I can't forget you again. Over 6. I think that formula is for PET, exactly. It's for PET. So, just find something. I know it can be a lot in the financial analysis where they are doing all these estimations and but there really no mnemonic for those formulas because there are formulas on its own, right? So just try and get through it, but not too much force, but just understand what they mean. Because you will definitely come across numbers in your exam. Now, the trick is, are those numbers really financial ROI, payback? Just a little, not so much deep into, because I know we are not accountants, right? But as a business analyst, you need to understand, when they say payback period, you need to know how long is it going to take us to recoup our investment. That's what payback period means. How long is it going to take? Okay, we've invested 100,000. How many years will it take for us to break even? Yeah, so unfortunately, it's a bit tricky in the financial analysis, but that would not make you fail your exam, actually. No. But it's good you have a good understanding of how it works. Okay.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Yes. So I don't think you should be that. I don't think anybody should be that worried about this financial analysis question. I'm yet to, I didn't get any question under financial analysis. And I've spoken to a few people as well. Most of the questions in the exam that have calculations, they are just calculations that you need to use your common sense to answer.
General knowledge.
General knowledge. Yes, most of them.
Yeah.
So and one thing I also noticed is that at the first glance, the question will look complicated, but by the time you read the question and analyze it and think about it, the answer just jumps at you. It's not that tough anymore. Bless me smiling.
Don't worry, you'll be fine. Yeah, I mean,
I didn't see any of those ROI and PV and
but understanding the concept will help you in some cases. Yeah, it will help you in some cases. Yeah. Okay, so stakeholders, all stakeholders as usual. And what's the output for validate requirements? I mean, definitely our requirements are designed and designs are now validated. Okay. Do we need an ego break? Are we okay? Can we stretch? This is coming soon.
You asked me if there's going to be a break, and I said we don't usually say break, but
not a break that you should go away. Some people will go and sleep, and I don't want that.
10 minutes, go attend to kids.
Oh, okay. Are we all voting to go?
Maybe not up to 5
minutes. Maximum of 5 minutes. Maximum, please. Okay. I don't want us to slip off, please.
Yes, because if we break it like that, some people might just get tired and all that. So maybe go drink water.
So we come back 21:50 on the dot. I'll start. 21:50 will start. Yeah, we'll continue.
Okay.
Okay, so like we said, the output is requirements and designs that are validated. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Quiz time. Are we ready? Are we out there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
It was kind of quiet. Okay, so I was still sharing this one. Let's go to tax 3, question 1, 30 seconds, start now. Okay, so we end the poll and let's see the results. Okay, yeah, that's correct. So it means that it's not consistent. I mean, whether it's from stakeholder A or B, requirements must always be consistent. Once they're conflicting each other, then that means there are some inconsistencies. Okay, let's move on to the next one. 30 seconds, please. Okay, 9 submission and the poll. Okay, so let's share results to see. Was this one tricky? Okay, what is the name of an abstraction representing some or all of the proposed solution? I mean, once you hear abstraction, just know that they're talking about models. That's the answer. The answer is model. Diagram, well, it's a bit tricky, but diagram might not be abstract and code, right? So you are dealing with some kind of expression. It's a form of representation too, right? But the trick here is the abstraction. When we talk about abstraction representing some or all of the proposed solution, we're dealing with models, not diagrams. Yeah, concept, there's really nothing like concept actually. I think that's and matrix is matrix. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. 30 seconds, please. Okay, we have 8 submissions. Okay, we're gonna end the poll now. Let's share the results and see. Okay, so some people pick business rules. Now, this is where your understanding of the techniques comes to play. Now, when we talk about the data dictionary, you know it's a no-no, right? Because that's trying to define your data. So that's out of it. Because we're talking about something that helps us to organize our requirements based on solution components which they belong to. In my head, that already tells me something about scope, right? Scope modeling. That's the answer actually, but let's look at it individually. Business rules, what are we talking about when we say business rules? Business rules are just conditions. It's not the main aim of business rule is not to help you organize things within boundaries or attach it to the solution or something. No, business rules are conditions in which helps us to keep things in shape, aligned. For example, you say, okay, if a customer comes in to buy stuff and then it's expired or something, how do you treat it? So business rules say, okay, report to this. That's not a good example. Let's use any customer that spends above 200 in a week will automatically get a loyalty of $50. It's a business rule that you've created to say, this is how we want to operate. So business rules might differ for different organizations depending on what you're trying to achieve. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. So definitely business rule is out of, because it's not helping us to organize things, you know, maybe solution components. No. Scope modeling, on the other hand, actually helps us to do that. And class diagram is not a technique. So that's automatically you can just eliminate that one. Class diagram is not a technique. However, the other 3 are techniques, but it's only scope modeling that speaks to the question. Okay, so let's move on to the last question in this knowledge, in this particular task. 30 seconds, please. Okay, we have 9 submissions. Okay, so we end the polling and share the results. One person chose verify requirements. That means I've not done a good job. If anybody is still picking verify requirements, can that person share with me why you think this answer is verify requirement? Maybe there's something I've done that's confusing. Do you mind? Or was it a mistake? Maybe at some, no, it's true. Maybe you've clicked before you say, no, that question is not verified now. Okay, nobody wants to share. It's okay.
Wow.
Now, let me ask you. Okay, go on.
I have something to share. I didn't pick verify. But yeah. So these two terms, it was something that was really confusing to me initially, and then actually it was in the watermark guide. That's when. So for me, the way I just remember it is when I see validate is going back, and verify is going forward.
That's fantastic.
That's something that really helped me. That helped me to understand it.
That's fantastic, actually. Now, when we talk about verify, there are some words that should pop out, to you. Quality. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Quality. When you say quality, or you are trying to, or when they list the characteristics to you, say, oh, we are trying to see if this requirement is concise. What tax are we doing? You know it's verification. Now, when you talk about trying to confirm something from stakeholder or from business requirements, you know they're trying to validate. So that's the two main difference. How you can distinguish between validate and verify. Okay, so thank you. I think that's the last question for this knowledge area. So we'll move ahead. We'll move on to the next one. Define requirement architecture. Okay, so this is the input and output diagram. And what comes into it, the input required. We have requirements of any state, information management approach, solution scope, and all of that. Okay, so let's move on. What are we trying to do here? When we say define requirement architecture, what are we trying to, what's the purpose, what's the description? Really, it's just to view our requirements and see if they collectively support each other. Not only that they collectively support each other, do they also help us to achieve the business objectives? That's what we're doing in requirement architecture, bringing everything together. Okay, are they all fitting? So it's like when you're building the puzzle now. That's what requirement architecture helps you to do. When you say an architectural thing, what comes to you is you're building something, right? And that's they call them architects. So just remember, try and use that to remember when you're trying to build something. And whatever you're building and they're not supporting each other, what happens? It's going to stick out. It's going to fall off. So that should help us remember what it means when we're talking about requirement architecture. Now, requirement architecture is not intended to really demonstrate traceability, no, but rather to show how each requirement or element work together in harmony with one another to support the business requirements, and then to structure them in various ways to align with the viewpoint of different stakeholders. Architecture, just trying to build all these requirements together collectively, and it must definitely support each other. Okay, let's move on. What are the input in which we're going to need for this? Definitely, when you're talking about architecture, you're trying to build something, organize something, then you need to bring in your information management approach. Who remembers where we developed this?
BAPM.
Thank you. Business analysis, planning, and monitoring. Now, this actually helps us to define how the business analysis information will be stored and accessed. Okay. Also, we bring in our requirements in any state. Every requirement should be stated at least once and incorporated into the whole architecture. Also, we bring in a solution scope. Must be considered to ensure that requirement architecture is aligned with the boundaries of the desired solution. So those are input. Let's quickly go into the elements. What are the steps? What are the things we need to do to be able to define the requirement architecture? Okay, so we need to, we need our requirement viewpoint and view. This just defines our requirements will be represented, organized, and their relationship. So coming from different stakeholders, we all have different viewpoints, view and all. But then we have to be able to define those viewpoints and view. Okay, stakeholder A says he wants this particular thing. Stakeholder B says they want this particular thing. How does stakeholder A and B, sometimes because your requirements can be related actually. Now, what are the architecture, the templates that you have? Sometimes we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. If there's something out there that already works for you, that helps you to define your requirement architecture, come on, you go for it. So whether it's industry-based or sector-based or organization-based, just find those templates that helps you to define this thing. Completeness, is it understandable? Are you telling the full story? Because at the end of the day, it's like we're building a house. So the full story is what? The semi-detached or detached building. Also, relate and verify requirements relationship. Now, I would like to take a pause here. Do not mix this relate and verify requirement relationship with the characteristics of a requirement. The characteristics of requirements are 9, whereas when we're talking about verifying requirement relationships, we have about 5 of them. It has to be defined, necessary, correct, unambiguous, and consistent. Now, you will notice that 3 of these actually exist in the requirement characteristics. So note the difference. I think there was a question in the exam that was asking me about defined. They now said, is this a characteristics or does it define the relationship? So you have to know where they fall under. They're both different, even though you have some overlaps between both of them. Okay, and then the last one says business analysis, information architecture, defining relationship for information such as requirement designs, models, and the recitation results. Now, example of viewpoints may be your business process model, your data model, user interactions, whatever templates. We've talked about templates. It could be any. It could be industry-based, organization-based, sector-based, yeah. The actual requirements and designs for a particular solution from a chosen viewpoint are referred to as view. Now, this is talking about difference between view and viewpoint. Now, a collection of views makes up the requirement architecture for a specified solution. Elements, the steps we need to do to achieve, to be able to define the requirement architecture. Guidelines and tools. What do we need to help us in this task? What can we reference? Architecture management software, legal regulatory information, methodologies and framework. Yeah, and it could be, the list is not exhaustive, so you could have some other things that would help you to define the requirement architecture. Now, what are the techniques that helps us to do this? Data modeling, functional decomposition, interviews, organizational modeling, scope modeling, workshop. Now, who are our stakeholders? Remember, we've been coming from all stakeholders. Yeah, but in this case, really, we have some people that are responsible for it. However, any stakeholder can still be brought in if their input is required. So we have the domain. Now, remember, how many stakeholders does BABOK refer to? 11. 11, not 2, 11. Now, these are parts of the stakeholders. Now, whenever you hear that you need someone that is knowledgeable in the topic, like that would help to define what the scope, or if we're defining the scope, someone very knowledgeable about what we are talking about. You should know they're talking about the domain subject matter expert. Now, when you're talking about someone that is knowledgeable about how we are going to implement this, what are the conditions, what are the requirements for this solution to be possible, then you know they're talking about the implementation subject matter expert. Now, there's actually somewhere in BABOK, I think at the beginning, where these stakeholders are defined. It's important for you to know the definition of stakeholder, because you would find them in the exams. They will ask you, one stakeholder is doing something. What do you think this stakeholder is? Now, if you don't have a good knowledge of what the definition of the stakeholders are, you might not be able to identify, especially sometimes between domain subject matter experts and implementation subject matter expert. Also, between end user and customer, very tricky. So identify those ones that are closely related so that you can, differentiate them, when need be. Now, when you hear anything about who is responsible for the success of the project or something, they're talking about project manager. Once you hear responsible for the overall is project manager. Responsible for the risk of is project manager. When you talk about approvals, of funding, of, who is the authority, who is approval, they're talking about sponsor, who's going to make the final decision about, they are relating to sponsor. Now, when you talk about tester means someone that would validate that whatever thing we are building or have built will work. So that's a tester. So try and go in depth and look through the definition of the stakeholder. It's going to help us a lot. Okay, so let's go to the output, requirement architecture. In there you find your completed requirements, how they are related, and the contextual information. That's just grammar. Like, you know, English, it's just to make your audience understand what you're talking about. Whether you're using noun, you're using verb, whatever it is, it's just a way of organizing your requirements in such a way that is understandable. Now, a requirement that is not understandable to other stakeholders is as good as no requirement, because they're just going to jump in. Especially your developers, they don't like to waste time at all. They take your BRD, they're like, what's this guy? Come on. They just dump it, or they do what they think you're saying, and then at the end of the day, the solution is not useful, it's not fit for purpose. Okay. Any question before we move on to quiz time? Okay. So we're going to go through the first question now. You have 30 seconds. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, and then let's share the results. This was a bit tricky, right? So which statement best describes the relationship between business analysis, information architecture, and requirement architecture? Now, this is where you get to, differentiate it. I mean, it's very simple. Information architecture is a component of requirements. The end goal is remember what the task is. Define requirement architecture. Now, when we were defining it, we needed that information management as part of what we're going to use. So whatever information management architecture you had, it's going to be part of your requirement architecture. So that's the answer. Information architecture is a component of your requirement architecture, not the other way around. Okay. Yes, please go on.
Yeah, so when I saw that, and that was what I thought about first, even if that was not what I answered. I think for me, I guess maybe I still have to understand terminologies. Like when you say information architecture, I think for me, I'm more familiar with information management approach.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
So when I say information architecture, I'm like, okay, I don't know, is it really, it's new, I've not heard that before, right? Yeah, so I picked C, but I guess, I don't know, is there any way I could understand, like when we're talking about, if we say architecture or the approach, are we saying the same thing?
So whether we are saying information management or we are saying information architecture, it's all about your information management. It's like all in your information management approach or plans or, But when we're talking about requirement architecture, you need that information management approach or the architecture or the plan to be able to build that whole house.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Or maybe clarification. Can you maybe unpack the difference between information architecture or information approach and requirements architecture? Because what I was thinking was that the requirement architecture will be part, because, okay, in my head, I'm thinking information architecture or approach is how information from beginning of the business analysis process to the end is going to be structured or how it to be managed. And requirements architecture should be part of that. So requirement architecture should be a component of information architecture. Maybe you can clarify that for me.
Okay, so the first thing is, like I said, when you see questions, you try to first of all nail it down to where they are taking you to, where they are referencing. If I see this question, I know that. So definitely we've talked about information management approach when we were planning, right? So we'd have some structures I would have put in place. And now the tricky part of it, they just make it tricky for us by saying, even though it's in BABOK actually, it's a lifted question from BABOK actually. Now, if you look at it, they said relationship between information architecture and the requirement architecture. Now, let's go back to the elements for just a minute. The input, I mean, not element. Now, when we're looking at the things we need to consider during defining requirement architectures, one thing that popped up was they referred us back to our information management. Whether it is approach or when you say architecture, it's still like all tied together. Architecture just means what we are building, right? So whatever information approach we are building or how we want to handle our information is important to us when we are in requirements, when we're trying to define requirement architecture. So given that when I'm defining my requirement architecture, I need to consider my information architecture or information management architecture or information approach, it becomes a subset, it becomes a component. Component just means something that is without it, you might not be able to define that requirement architecture. So it's still like you define the information management plan or approach. Yeah, it's same how we want to store it and all. Remember that pattern of how we want to store and save is also important in the architecture. It will help us also, we want to tow that same path. How did we say we are going to save all this? So for example, we are building a house. If in my information architecture we've said that, you know what, the washroom, room 1 and room 2 must have different washroom, or let's say the washroom must be in between room 1 and 2. How would I know that? If, and remember, it's the house I'm building. I'm building a house. How would I know that washroom 1 is supposed to be between room 1 and room 2 if I don't refer back to the information architecture or your information management approach or your information plan or whatever it is that you've, I don't know if that makes sense. So you have to know the context of what the question is asked. Your definition for information management plan is the same definition I also know. Fantastic. However, in the context of defining requirements, it's going to be a subset. Now the question says, what is their relationship? For me to be able to complete the house, I need to know where things are supposed to be, where room 1 will be, where room 2 will be. What would I put in the storage room? What would I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So the right answer is the first one and the second one.
What did you say?
The right answer is the first.
The right answer is the first one. Yes.
So, Shola, thank you for bringing this up because honestly, it was something that I was looking at and debating myself when I was reading the Bible. When I got to that particular place, like, why should the information management, information architecture be a subset of the requirements? And then in talking about that, I'm just going to share how it made sense to me. Right, I realized that the entire reason for your job as a BA is to gather requirements and structure them in such a way that you can build a solution, right, that meets that requirements architecture. And it doesn't matter what information you are gathering, it doesn't matter who you're talking to, it doesn't matter what you are writing down. The essence of the entire information that you're collecting is to build that requirements architecture that you translate into your solution. So that's how I realized it made sense to me that information was a subset of requirements in that architecture was a subset of requirements architecture in that respect.
Fantastic, and that's correct. So that solution is the house in which I'm trying to describe, right? The end goal is to build a house. The end goal is to develop that solution. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the second question. I'm launching.
Quick question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, please.
What's the Babcock reference for this?
Okay, so if you go on the define architecture, I can look. Let me try and look for the page. It has to be under the define requirement architecture.
Page 150.
Hold on, let's see.
It's 7.4.5.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't understand.
Sorry, 7.4.4.5.
Okay, so the answer is actually in 7.4 points. Okay, yeah, 7445.
Yeah, 7.4.4.5.
Exactly. 0.5, yes.
Brilliant,
So,
thank you.
yes, so that's on page 151 of BABOK. Thank you. Everything we are doing here is BABOK based, trust me. Okay.
I have one other question then. In the previous chapter, you mentioned that abstraction is the same as model.
Well, yes, when you talk about abstractions, we refer to models.
Can you give me a BABOK reference for that?
We'll have to check that. If you go to, that will be under your techniques, actually. I can, Chinyere, can you note that question, and then we'll go so that we don't, delay in time for the class.
Thank you.
Yeah. Chinyere, please note the question down. Thank you. And then I'll get you the reference.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm launching another question now. We have 30 minutes, please. 30 seconds.
Wow, I was going to say you're really generous on this question.
Just 2 submissions. Come on. Okay, I have 5. Okay, I'll wait to have more before I end the poll. Seven. Can I have 2, 3 more? Okay, 10. Okay, great. So I'm gonna end the poll now. Great. Okay, let's share the results. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, you know what? This speaks to you knowing your technique, right? You have to know your technique to be able to answer this question. Generally speaking, the answer is scenario and use case, which is the last option there. That was tricky, right? A lot of people pick the first question. That means you interchanged the response. Okay, so this is where it is. This is how to know it. Remember, in your use case, is never one scenario for use case. Use case has the preferred part. It has alternate parts in your use case. So you say, okay, if a customer comes to an ATM machine to get some funds, ask for PIN. If the PIN is wrong, decline, end transaction. That's an alternate part, because really you don't want the normal flow of events should be that the PIN will be correct, and then the user goes in and then gets money, gets the balance and all. However, there are always alternate parts or exceptions. So a use case is, and we're still going to look at one of the techniques use case. A use case is never a one scenario. So that's that's just a difference. A scenario, however, is a scenario. It's just one type of a case study, just one way of doing things. Does that make sense to us? Because I can see majority actually pick use case and scenario. Any question on this? So the answer is scenario is generally understood to describe just one way an actor can accomplish a particular goal, while a use case describes all the possible outcomes of an attempt to accomplish a goal. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, 30 seconds. This is a giveaway, actually. But let's see. Okay, we have 9 submissions, and then we end the poll. Let's share the results. Why did you pick requirement viewpoint? I mean, this is really a giveaway question. It's when you hear anything talking about structuring all the requirements, is requirement architecture. No other word. They might come in different, there's nothing like requirement viewpoints when you're structuring, building. So the correct answer is requirement architecture. Okay, let's move on to the last question on this task. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, we have 4 submissions. I'm waiting for more. Okay, so end poll and then share results. So most times when you're representing requirements, the first thing that comes very closely knitted to them is their attributes, not their limitations, not restrictions, and definitely not requirements. Assumptions and constraints are defined and clarified as requirements. We're talking about requirements themselves, so you cannot say the answer is requirements again. So assumptions and constraints are defined and clarified as requirements are understood and documented with their associated attributes, relationships. Okay. Now let's move on. Define design options. So yeah, we've specified a model requirements, we've verified them, we've validated them, we've defined the requirement architecture. Now we can define our design options. Okay, what options are actually available to us? What's out there? What are options based on everything we do now? What can we put forward? How many solutions? Is it A, B, C? You know, okay. So that's what defining design option means. So we're trying to define solution approach. What are the improvement opportunities? We're trying to allocate. This is where requirement allocation comes into play. I'm sure we'd have heard of that. And what does requirement allocation mean? It's just allocating the requirement to the solution component. So if the solution component is the one that will give, make the background blue, what requirement ties to that? That's what we mean by allocation. Allocating, well, don't let me use allocating again. Mapping the requirements to the solution component. So that part of the solution that is going to show what the requirement said. That's what we mean by requirement allocation. And also represent design options to meet desired feature states. At the end of the day, that's our goal. We want to define our options. Okay, note. So in defining solution options, I mean, we're talking about identifying, exploring, and describing the different possible ways of meeting the need that was identified in the strategy analysis. When designing a solution, there may be one or more design options identified. So as a business analyst, don't get yourself boxed up to say, oh, okay, there is usually not one way of doing things. I mean, there will be several options that will meet the stakeholder needs, and that's when you as a business analyst come into play. So there may be one or more design option identified, and each design option represents a way to satisfy a set of requirements. So that's really the purpose and description of what we're going to be doing in defining the design option. Now, what are the inputs? We need a change strategy. We need our requirements validated and prioritized. We need a requirement architecture. Now, who can tell me where is this change strategy coming from?
Strategy analysis.
Strategy analysis, thank you. Where is the requirement validated and prioritized coming from? Now, there are 2 different types of requirements. Requirement validated, where is it coming from?
RADD.
Good. Requirements that are prioritized, where are they coming from?
Life cycle management.
Life cycle.
Thank you. We need to know where these things are coming from. Requirement architecture, where is it coming from?
Right.
Good. Now, what are the steps? What do we need to do to help us achieve this, to help us design these options? I mean, we need to define solution approach. That's first thing. Okay, so are we buying? That's the purchase. Are we creating it? Do we have the capabilities to create on it? Or are we doing a combination of both? So when you talk about solution approaches, this is where you get to consider that. It is when you are defining your design option. Also, identifying improvement opportunities. Okay, what improvement opportunities are? Majorly, they fall under the three. I mean, all of these CQIs that we do in an organization, continuous quality improvement and all of that, it's always about whether we are trying to increase efficiency, want to improve access to information, or we're identifying capabilities, you know. We're trying to make the system lean enough to eliminate all kind of waste. So in defining your design option, you need to consider that. You need to identify improvement opportunities. You need to do your requirement allocation, and that's what we talked about. You assign your requirements to solution components and releases. And then you need to describe your design options, you know, whether rules, I mean, business rules helps you to do that, or your business processes, operational business decisions, your org structure, and all of that. So these are the elements that we consider when we are defining the design option. What are the guidelines and tools? What are things that would help us, that will facilitate this task? Okay, we talk about existing solutions. I mean, are there existing products in the company, maybe from a third party, you know, that can be a component of this design? So you need to refer back to them and say, how does it work? Oh, okay, we are trying to create a new LMS. What are other people doing? What is Udemy doing? What is LinkedIn doing? What is, you know, we have lots of them out there. You need to consider existing solutions when you're defining your design option. I mean, future state description, which we got also from our strategy analysis, it helps us to keep us in, you know, on track. How do we identify, I mean, it identifies the desired state for us of the enterprise, so that we are sure that, I mean, the solution we are trying to define is going to deliver value at the end of the day. Also, requirement trace, I mean, defines the design option that will best fulfill known requirements. Traceability is very important, actually. Solution scope, talking about boundaries. Anytime you hear about solution scope, just know that you're trying to stay within the boundary of the solution. If the solution scope does not require you to build, you know, a gaming component, why would you want to build a gaming component in the solution? Who's going to use it? So solution scope is actually very important when we are referencing our guidelines and tools. Okay, so techniques. What techniques helps us to do this? Benchmarking and market analysis, brainstorming, document analysis, interviews, lessons learned, mind mapping, root cause analysis, survey or questionnaire, interviews, vendor assessment, and workshops. Do you have any question on the technique? Anyone particularly would want us to, you know, that you really don't understand how it applies generally, that you want us to just talk about?
Mind mapping.
Okay. Any other one?
Document analysis.
Okay, great. So let's start with D, document analysis. Document analysis, most times, I like to use that when I'm doing elicitation and collaboration, actually. It's just you analyzing existing documents. Now, remember, document analysis gives you information about the current state. Always remember that. About the current state, what exists, what is, I mean, it doesn't really say much about you. It's not a good technique to use when you're more focused on the future state. However, it will help you get information you need with regards to the current state. Now, document analysis is just reviewing document. Okay, so for example, we want to build this solution and know, do we have any existing requirements, maybe from another project that is time? You know, sometimes when we do projects, we do them as programs. So there might be several projects that are linked together in the program. So are there interdependencies? Are there some information that are actually on ground that we can review? So as the word implies, it is used to provide information needed to describe the design option and design elements. Mostly document analysis is the information we already have, whether physically or maybe, you know, in our shared drives or maybe in a repository. It's also good because sometimes maybe the developer or the former business analysis I was working on, it has moved on to other projects or even out of the company. When we have such documents, you as a newbie can actually go in and then review. So even though you were not there when they, you know, did all these documents, depending on the phase of the project which you came in, the document actually helps you. So it's a way of eliciting information, document analysis, analyzing documents that you already have. that is relevant to the project. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go to mind mapping. Mind mapping is just mapping people's mind, people's ideas. So for example, oh God, you know what? I need to get certified. I need to get my CBAP. Now, one thing to note is in mind mapping, you start from the end goal. The end goal is what? You want to get your CBAP. Now, from that end goal becomes your center point. You now start drawing out from the, okay, to get my CBAP, what do I need to do? You draw one line first. Attend a training session. Another line. Have a reading plan. Another line. Have something. Another line. Register, which is very important. If you've not registered, you want to do your CBAP, it's a very good motivating factor. Go register for exams. You will be amazed at the speed in which you devote, you start reading, studying more and all. So you start with the end goal. What is that end goal? That becomes the middle part. And then from that end goal, you start branching out. You start branching out. Okay, if I say I want to attend this training session, what training session should I? Is it the one organized by Chinyere Obani? Is it the one organized by Babok? Is it the one organized by Hamilton Chapter? Is it the one organized by? By the time you know it, you're having different branches, but they are all mapped together. So it's like a nested diagram that you're trying, but it all speaks to what? Getting certified. So you cannot find any branch that is independent, that is not mapped to something. They are always mapped. But the most important thing to note about mind mapping is you start with the end goal in mind, and then you start branching out. But all the branches are linked. They are linked up back. So whatever path you follow from the tree in which you've done, it will lead you to getting certified. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Let's move on. Stakeholders. So you have your domain, implementation, operational support, project manager, and supplier. Output, your design options, definitely. Now remember, your design options, you can be more than one. So design option actually describe various ways to satisfy one or more needs in a context. They may include solution approach, like we've talked about, improvement opportunities provided by the option and the component that define the option. Now, it might not be one. And that's why Babok specifically stated that design options, not design option, design options. It's usually more than one. In fact, as a business analyst, one of the ways to really know, how vast you are and your expertise is to provide several options. How would you feel if you need something and maybe you walk to a shop and they say, oh, I need a shirt, and they give you one? You feel disappointed, right? You're expecting that they'll bring like 3, 4, 5 options for you to choose from. That's the ideal scenario. You should have options for your stakeholders to choose from. I don't know if that makes sense. So describing design options really at the end of the day should not be one solution. You should have several solutions, and then from there, you start analyzing, which is the next task you're going to look at now. You start analyzing the potential value of those options, to be able to recommend a solution. Okay. Quiz time. Are we ready? Okay, so, oh, okay. Okay, 30 seconds. Now, some of these questions might not really be directly related to the specific task we're doing. It might just be everything in the knowledge area, so. Okay, 7 submissions, 8. Okay, let's have 2, 3 more. And then, okay, so I'm going to end the polling now, and then I'll share the results. So which type of requirement describes the behavior and information that the solution will manage? The answer is functional requirement. Non-functional requirement describes the service or conditions in which the solution will perform, not the behavior. When you see describes the behavior and the information that the solution will manage, you're talking about the functional requirements. Business requirements is actually, out of it, because business requirements is just what we need to deliver value to the business. It's not describing anything functional at all. Okay. Stakeholder requirements. What else the stakeholders think that we can achieve that business need? Okay, so let's move on. 30 seconds, please. Okay, so we have 9 submissions, 2 more to go. Okay, we end the polling now, and we share the results. Okay, so this is a giveaway actually. In document analysis, thank God we actually discussed document analysis just a minute ago. Your document must be valid and it must be current. If it's outdated, don't bother doing document analysis on that document. If it's not valid, if it's invalid, don't bother. So the answer is it must be both current and valid. Okay, let's move on to the next one. 30 seconds. Okay, I have 9 submissions. Let's have 2 more and then we close the poll. I have 10 submissions. I have 11 and we end the poll. Okay, let's share results. Remember, when we're talking about the elements, was it in the elements? Yes, we're talking about the elements and we said identifying improvement opportunities includes what? Increase efficiency, improve information access, and then identify additional capabilities. Those are the 3 things that come under identifying improvement opportunity. So the one that should be the answer here is, that doesn't belong to the group, is include performance measure. No, it shouldn't be. It's not part of the improvement opportunities that we discussed during the define design options. Okay. Let's go to the next one. 30 seconds, please. This is a giveaway, actually. We've stressed this enough to this class. So 30 seconds. Hmm. 10 submissions, okay. 11. Okay. And we end the poll. Okay, let's share results. So the answer is design. Remember, when the focus is on understanding the needs, what is that, please?
Requirements.
Requirements. When the focus of specifying and modeling activities, understanding the needs, that is requirement. The output is requirement. But when the focus is on a solution, what are we talking about? Design. So let's remember that. Models are just abstract ways of representing the proposed solution. Packages can be anything. Packages. You package things together, put things together. It's a package. They are the package, It's not what we're talking about. So the correct answer is design. Okay, 30 seconds. This is a bit tricky, and if you've not read your business analysis perspective, but there's also a general knowledge to the answer, actually. Yeah. "27 seconds and I have just one submission. What's going on?" Okay, I have 4 submissions now. Okay, I have 8 submissions. 9. I need 2 more. Okay, great. I have, oh, okay, fantastic. I have 12 submissions. So let's share the results. So this can actually be found in the information and technology part of the business analysis perspective. Remember, you have agile business process. So the IT part is where you find this answer, actually. And the correct answer is simulation. When you hear about mock-ups is strictly simulation. Now, experimentation, on the other hand, is talking about, you know, uncontrolled data. Like, you don't know what the outcome would be. You need to test it out. You need to, that's when we talk about experimentation. Now, it's tricky because if you look at, I think, was it when they were talking in elicitation and collaboration, there are 3 ways in which you can do elicitation and collaboration, right? You have the collaboration, you have the experiment, and you have the investigation or something like that. But when you go to that business analysis perspective, that is when they really tied the mock-ups to the simulation. Okay, so I think someone has a question, right? Go on. Does anyone have a question? Okay, I thought I saw something pop up now. So the correct answer to this is, when you see mock-ups, it's simulation. I'm talking about simulation. Okay, let's move on to question 4. 30 seconds, please. Okay, 24 seconds. We have 10 submission. Okay, 12 submissions, and that is it. Thank you. Let's share the results. That's correct. So who is typically responsible for designing and implementation potential solution? Like we said, it's just a straight, giveaway answer. When you hear implementing of the solution, yeah, implementation SME, that's it. Not the business analyst, actually, no. Okay.
This is a bit tricky for me. Like, this is a bit confusing for me, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
so
I would, well, maybe it's just my...
No, go on. You can share your thoughts. Let's see.
I would think that the implementation SME is someone that has a lot of knowledge about the solution, something like that. Like, and then the business analyst is responsible for designing. I guess that was what's going on.
Say that again. We couldn't hear you well.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought the implementation SME, or I would think that the implementation SME is someone who has like a lot of knowledge about the solution, and the BA is the person who will design, who will be responsible for designing and implementing the solution.
Okay.
You know, like, I don't know, like doing the mock-ups, the prototypes, and...
Okay, so
just clarify it for me.
Yeah, that's fine. So another thing we should note is that sometimes in an organization, a BA job might include all other people's job as well, depending on the expertise of that BA. So I understand where the confusion is coming from. However, BA does not really design and implement solution. They are just like liaison officers, trying to coordinate all stakeholders and then put that information together in a document called BRD that will be passed on to the people that would actually work on the solution. So whatever the BA is doing is just like trying to represent what the requirement they've gathered from the different stakeholders. So when you say who is typically responsible for designing and implementing potential solution, definitely not the business analyst. Now, you might say, okay, domain SME, domain expert, they're just experts in terms of clarity, in terms of scope, what we need to do. Are we sure we've captured all the elements? You know, they are domain subject matter, they are knowledgeable. Now, exactly, so that's the word. When you say knowledgeable about, then you pick domain subject expert. Now, when you say generally responsible for the overall success of the project or risk or something, they are talking about the project manager. However, the implementation subject matter expert is actually responsible for whatever requirements or conditions of implementation we need to consider. So that's where the difference comes in. Definitely not business analyst, because really we are not responsible for the designing and implementing of the solution, no. In fact, if you are confused about designing, implementing the solution, where does a BA implement solution? Do you know what, when you say implementing solution, that means bringing the solution to life. So that means it's a business analyst that is developing the solution. No. However, like I said, there are some organizations that the BA is the domain subject expert, is the subject matter expert, is the project manager, is everything. But in the context of BABOK, they are different. I don't know if that helps to clarify a little bit how these roles play out. You can also refer to the beginning of BABOK. They shed more light on, I mean, there was more discussion regarding how to, differentiate within these roles. But like I said, different organizations are doing different things. But in the context of BABOK, this is how they all differ from each other. The expectation is that they will all be different. We won't have overlapping roles. However, in the real world, that's not the case.
Try page 17 and page 18 in the BABOK.
Thank you, Judy. Is that Judy? Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move to the next one.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 questions in this one, so you have 1 minute. We have 2 questions in this particular one. Okay, we have just 1 submission. Okay, we have 6 submissions. Let's have some more before we close the poll. Okay, we have 8, 2 more, and then we close the poll. We end the poll. 2 more. Okay, so we end the poll now. Okay, so let's share the results to see. So the first one, when does the business analyst ensure the visibility of the proposed requirements to support the business and user needs? That's a giveaway. You should know that that is a RAD. Now, this question is coined in such a way that if they are not asking you about the knowledge area, they're asking you about the task. So if you look at it, the other three responses does not really tell you about a particular task or a knowledge area. The only one that describes it is the during requirement analysis and design definition. And remember, two things in which we strive to build during RAD is what? Stakeholders requirements and solution requirements, which still ties back to your business requirements and the user needs when you're validating. So that's the only one really that makes sense in all of the options. Every other one is just a, distraction. Now, the second question, you have just completed your assessment. So the correct answer for the first one is the second option during RAD. The second one, you have just completed your assessment of proposed design options for your project. Which of the following would not be one of the elements you would have performed as part of this task? So really, what the question they're asking is just about RAD. Like, what are the elements you would have? Now, saying just completing your assessment of the proposed design option. So that means you've done your, you've defined your design option. So the only thing left for you is just to analyze potential value. Now, which one here doesn't make sense? Definitely not the first one, because you're going to do that first one. You're going to recommend best solution at the end of RAD. You are going to assess design option, definitely. You're going to perform cost-benefit analysis when you're analyzing. Now, this question is actually a jump ahead because two of the options are actually treated in the analyze potential value and recommend solution. However, the last one is not even related to RAD. The solutions visibility is done where, please?
Strategy analysis.
Strategy analysis. That is where you would have done your. If the solution is not visible, what are we doing work on? I mean, why are we gathering information? Why are we planning? What are we planning on? If the solution is, so that has to have been settled in strategy analysis before we even move ahead at all. So for me, it's an elimination method here. You just look at, come on, what's visibility doing here? No way. And you strike it out. Okay. So that is all for this session. And then we move on to the last one. Analyze potential value and recommend solution. Now, what are we trying to do here? Remember, we've specified and modeled requirements. We've verified, oh yeah, it's correct, it's complete, it's atomic, and all. Oh yeah, we've validated, it meets our business requirements, stakeholder requirements, and all. Oh yeah, we've defined the requirement architecture. We've gone ahead to describe our design options. So we have about 2, 3, 4 options. Now is the time for us to narrow down. Analyze potential value of these options and recommend a solution. As a business analyst, you cannot go on to your stakeholder and just give them 4 options. You know what, this is what we're recommending. I think we should go with these 4 options. No, you still have to recommend one at the end of the day, even though you're going to do a comparison of what the number of options that you have so that they see why you've narrowed down to that particular one. Okay. So purpose and description, design option, you have to estimate potential value and then establish the most appropriate option. That's the end goal. We want to establish the most appropriate option. Now, please note, there may be no best option to recommend, or there may be a clear best choice. In some cases, this means the best option may be to begin work against more than one design option, perhaps to develop proof of concept and then measure the performance of each. What does that mean? Sometimes, let's say you have 4 options, 4 design options. It might be difficult for you to really narrow down to one. It might even mean that sometimes you go ahead with 2 options and still try to prove out of these 2 options which one would add more value to the organization. That's what the statement means. In other instances, all proposed designs may be rejected. That's possible. And more analysis may be needed to define a suitable design. It's also impossible that the best recommendation is actually to do nothing. Most times we forget that part. As a business analyst, we think we are compelled to recommend a solution. But if the current state is actually better than the all fall option you're going to recommend, then the best option will be do nothing. Okay. So we go into our input. What do we need here? Potential value design option. Potential value realized from strategy analysis, and then design options gotten from our defined design option. Okay. What are the elements? What are the things that we need to do that will help us to analyze these options that we have? Expected benefit. That's when all your financial costs will come into play, or your ROI payback. Okay, how long are we going to take to recoup our money, or what's going to be the net present value at the end of year 4, or you do all of that. Okay, is our benefits going to outweigh our expenses more than what we're going to gain from it? And that's when your benefits start shifting from negative to positive. Also, the costs, you need to consider that. Operating costs, efforts, ongoing costs, even after implementing, what are the costs? What are the training costs, human resources, a lot of things you need to consider. Determine value. Value comes in terms of when you're trying to weigh your benefit, if your benefit exceeds your cost, or if your cost exceeds your benefit. No investor really wants to go into when your cost exceeds your benefits. I mean, you're always going to be in a negative. And the last one there says assess design options and recommend solutions. So you consider your available resources, the constraints on the solution, and if there are any dependencies, these are the things in which you need to look into while you're trying to analyze potential value and recommend solutions. You don't want to get stuck because you've not considered a particular constraint. So even though the option is so good, and then you missed out on a particular constraint, which can pose a risk, it's good for us to have risks because we want to plan, we want to have a risk response. If this thing happens, this is how we're going to handle it, such that we will be able to maximize value from the solution in which we are recommending. So missing out on assumptions or constraints can be very, very, can have a great consequence on the solution recommended. Remember, business analysts recommend the option or option deemed to be the most valuable option to address the need. It is possible that none of the design options are worthwhile, and the best recommendation is do nothing. Okay, so let's go to guidelines and to what are the things we need to consult. Okay, business objective, current state description, future state description, risk analysis results, and scope, solution scope. It's all from the strategy analysis. Okay, what are the techniques? Acceptance and evaluation criteria, backlog management, brainstorming, business cases, business model canvas, decision analysis, estimation, financial analysis, focus group, interviews, metrics, risk analysis and management, survey or questionnaire, SWOT analysis, and workshop. Anything pointing out to us in these techniques that you would want us to look at? Okay, if there is none, we move on to stakeholders. I mean, we're familiar.
Sorry, one quick question here. I see I think for me, can you explain how, I know backlog management, you said it's to sequence the options, but I don't quite get it.
So really, let's forget about what is written here. Let's have a good understanding of what backlog management as a technique helps us to do. Now, when you hear backlog management, it only means that we have a lot of things to do. However, we cannot do them all at once. Now, what is the system we're going to have in place that will help us manage all those tasks? Because we don't want to forget any. So, for example, when you're talking about I don't know if you're familiar with Scrum, but in Scrum, you have your product owner, you have your Scrum Master, and all of that. Your product owner is the one that manages the backlog list. What do they mean by that? Backlog is just a list of items, a list of requirements that needs to be done. Now, the way it works in Scrum, for example, you have 20 requirements that needs to be done. But remember, your team is only working based on what they can do per day. I mean, that's what Scrum advises. Do what you can, every day. What are we doing today? And then you try to move things from that list. Now, there are things that come up on the list itself, and there are things that still stay. at the background. Now, backlog managers just helps us to prioritize things. So in your backlog list, you can see the first 5 items says, okay, priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another one says 6. So you know per time what you are attending to, what effort you are putting into any of these, requirements. Now, when we talk about backlog management in analyze potential value and recommend solution, it's still the same thing. It is used to sequence. How do we move things? Okay, so today we are considering the potential value of solution A. Solution B, solution D. You know, even when you have your options, they'll be prioritized, right? I mean, you can choose that, okay, I think the best option is we label that one, the other 1, 2, 3, 4. A backlog manager is just a list that helps you to manage your requirement. You don't want to lose anything. It's just a funky name for a list, nothing more. So backlog management means there are some things that are still on the line in waiting to be addressed. That's all.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Would
Yeah,
you
thank
say
you.
that, sorry.
Go on.
Would you say that backlog management is only tied to adaptive approach?
Mostly it's using adaptive approaches, all the Scrum, Kanban, and all of that. Yeah, it's mostly. But really, like I tell people, you know, the world is really moving on. Whether you're on traditional approach or not, we've all noticed that. I mean, adaptive approaches actually seems to work faster in organizations these days. Nobody does a project from start to end anymore. You do it in little iterations. And then backlog management is what helps you, because really it can be tricky when you're doing things in little iteration. It's very easy to drop things along the way. So that helps you to keep focus of what. So yeah, backlog management concept actually relates more to adaptive approaches. Your agile and all of that, yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Stakeholders, I mean, our non-usual stakeholders are still involved. Chinyere, are you saying something?
Yeah. Someone asked the question, so I'll just try to pay attention.
Okay. We can't hear you well, Chinyere.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Dare said, how can one really master the BABOK considering its volume and how tricky the questions are? Trust me, this is something that bothers every BA. We are reading the BABOK, so I'll let Shola. What do you have to say?
I mean, to be honest, I am a BABOK fan. So when I started reading BABOK, it was boring. So I went to study guide. This one.
Yes.
I went to CBAP study guide, and then it made more sense to me. But then they were scattering things for me a bit. And then I went back to BABOK. But then when I was going back to BABOK, it now made more sense to me. Now, this is the approach.
Study guide.
Are we familiar with the concept of Kumon? Kumon, do we all know Kumon?
Yes. Yes.
Kumon is just about the power of repetition.
Yeah.
So whether you like BABOK or not, whether you like study guide, whether you prefer this one, watermark or not, trust me, if you are dedicated and you put in 1 hour or 2 hours a day to study, there is no way you won't understand it. Trust me, the first time you read it, you might not understand. The second time, it bounces back. Third time, it begins to make sense to you. Fourth time, you're like, this is what they are saying. There is no hard and fast rule to how we all assimilate. However, you have to be consistent, disciplined. So the trick to reading BABOK, if you would ask me, is you might not want to start with BABOK. I agree. I totally agree with that. Find other resources that simplifies it. When you are done simplifying, please come back to BABOK. It's very important. Don't neglect BABOK. Simply use whatever you can to get that assimilation in. Then come back to BABOK. It makes sense. Let me give you an example. In BABOK now, they started from BA planning and analysis, planning and monitoring. When in actual sense, in real life, the project will start from strategy analysis. Strategy analysis is now the fourth thing they put there. If you start from BABOK, that's going to be very confusing for you. Like, we are planning them, we are here again, that's when we are defining them. What are we now planning? But that's not the way it is. In real world, you start with your strategy analysis. If you go to like study guide like this, they started with strategy analysis. So what I would say is, once you try and find a simplifying material that works for you, and you come back to BABOK, it makes a whole lot of sense. At a point, I abandoned all of these ones. I was just using my BABOK and my simulation. And another thing is, all those simulation materials, whether it's Simply Learn or BABOK and all their questions is always lifted from BABOK. And that's a very good one.
What's the title of this book? What's the title of the book you're holding?
This is Certified Business, I don't know, okay, where's my camera? Certified Business Analysis Study Guide by Wusef. Cybex, I think Cybex or something.
I have the soft copy, so I can send it to everyone.
Yeah.
So, Shola. Oh,
yes,
sorry. No, sorry, Chi was still talking. Sorry.
Well, I said I had the soft copy of it, so anyone.
Oh, okay.
It,
so, yeah.
I'll forward it to the person.
In response to what Shola just said with study any other material, then come back to BABOK. Okay, so the challenge I have with that is I use watermark and also adaptive, especially watermark. And I actually had this discussion with Chi a couple of days back, and so now I'm good with the watermark guide, and I'm studying the BABOK, and I'm like, what's the point? It's basically the same thing. There is nothing. So at the end, I don't want to use the word benefit. Like, there's no benefit in reading BABOK because it's the guide, it's the Bible. But to be honest, I see it as a waste of my time, in quote, reading BABOK after digesting watermark, because I was trying to go page by page and like, no, this, I don't see the difference. Maybe it's just my own perspective.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. So the need for you to go back to BABOK is because some materials might have twisted some things in the name of making it simplified for you. Another reason is because BABOK is more robust than all of the study materials. Trust me, I used about 3 other ones before I even came back to BABOK. But then, by the time I was coming back to BABOK, I had a better understanding of how all the components relate to each other. So there is no argument about which is more robust. BABOK has much more information. Now, all these other materials have simplified it well, very well. And they've removed some information that they think, oh, maybe you really don't need and all of that. So BABOK might just be like your baseline. You know what we mean by baseline? But if you feel that you've covered everything, I mean, you don't want to be caught in the web of, I think, I saw that in BABOK. Oh, and I think I should have, just to, all those gremlins that comes up in our head too. So just to dot all the I always recommend that no matter what the resources, the material you're using, please reference study BABOK, please. I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate of that. I wouldn't say don't.
I can see that.
Yeah, please. Whatever you use, whatever. Yeah. Please refer BABOK. It's very good. It has its benefit, trust me. It does. Okay.
I'd like to add something. So what I also told her is that some people find it difficult to read BABOK. I understand. But an easier way to read BABOK is when you're doing the questions and you are reviewing it after you have, you are done with the questions. Any question that you failed, always refer back to BABOK and then probably read that whole page to have, to understand what that whole question is about. Not only the ones you failed, even the ones that you got right, always refer back to BABOK. So it makes it easier to read BABOK that way. So if you don't want to start from I want to read chapter, chapter, this can be an easier way to read BABOK.
Yeah,
So,
I totally agree with Chi on that. And if you also notice, for those of you that use watermark, when watermark is explaining all the responses, they're still referring back to Babok. Yeah. Another thing is, I don't think there's any textbook that actually deals very well with techniques like Babok did. You know, there's a whole middle session. In fact, techniques is even almost more than the whole 6 knowledge areas. I don't think there's any textbook that, you know, technique actually has its own framework. The framework is called DUPE, D-U-P. That's my name on it, DUPE for framework. Description, usage, I think purpose, and then what's the E? Element, yeah. If you remember, that's the framework for all of the techniques. So really, all this textbook did not really drill down into how to understand each of those techniques. Your best bet is Babok in terms of techniques, yeah. Okay. Any other question? Yeah, we can't hear you. Am I the only one? We can't hear you, Chi.
we can hear you now.
It's getting better a little bit.
Okay, so another thing I noticed, okay, so when I was reading, I think my chapter 10, which is techniques, I didn't read it in the study guide, because if you noticed, when you get to that chapter 10 in the study guide, it will tell you that they didn't really explain it well. They will actually refer you to Babok. So immediately I read that, I just dropped the guide and I went to Babok. So my 10, I read it in Babok, not in the study guide, because they said it there and they didn't, you know, explain it the way. Yes, so it's very important. And then to Barry that asked this question, when I was talking to people that had passed CBAP, there was something that was common. In all the people I spoke to, they told me that they read the Babok almost say 5 times. So no, not necessarily Babok, the study guide or Babok. If you ask any people that passed, they'll say, I read the study guide 4 times. I read the Babok 3 times, and it was common. And then I'll go home and I'll be like, oh my God, how am I going to read this textbook 3 times, 4 times? At the end of the day, I just realized there was no way out. There was no other way out. You can't just read it once and pass. So if it's study guide or Babok, anyone you choose, at least make sure you read, you know, study guide at least twice, Babok, even if it's once, but you have to read all of them, you nothing less than 3 times. So
yeah, thanks. Another thing is, I always recommend that at least 1 month before your exam, you go into aggressive simulations.
Yes.
Simulation will bring you back to Babok, don't worry. So even if you've just read it once, or even if you've not read it at all, once you start simulating, you will see the need to go back to Babok. Definitely. So don't wait for 2 weeks to the exam for simulation. I know we have different IQs and all of that, but I would recommend that. 30 days before your exam, you're already, simulating almost every day, because your simulations will go back. Take you back to your Babok or your study guide or whichever one you use. Yeah. Okay. So let's continue.
So I don't understand what you said. Simulations, are these the exam simulations you're talking about?
Yes, exam simulations.
3 hours, yes.
And when you're doing exam simulation, please, let's stop all these 20 questions. That's not simulation.
Yes.
All these 30 questions. It's a good start, no doubt.
You are shaking my previous table. I was on that table before 25, and I was listening.
25 questions.
She was like, you are wasting your time. Get into simulation. My first simulation, I even had headache. I'm like, okay, you need to get used to this.
Yes.
You just need to get used to this 100 and this focus kind of thing.
When you do 120 at a go, it helps you to even master your timing. By the time you get into the examination hall, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
But when you're doing 25, you still don't have that concept of, okay, I'm sitting in an exam for 120 questions and it's 3.5 hours. Are you able to make it within that? You need to test yourself on 120 questions. It's not bad to start with 50, 25, but don't stay too long on it.
Sholan,
how often would you recommend doing the simulations? Like every day?
Well, it differs.
Can't do it every day.
Well, I did it every day.
You did it every day? Wow.
Oh yes, I did it every day. In fact,
what question bank did you use?
Can I ask a question concerning the simulations?
Okay.
Yes. So, I was discussing with someone I just that wrote some weeks ago, because I'm writing in a few days.
Sunday.
So, I've been doing simulations, and at this point, some of the knowledge areas I get 100, some 90 something, some 80 something, but I'm still not confident, because I feel, is it really a true test of my understanding, or is it because I've seen some questions that have repeated themselves and I already know the answer, and I don't know whether, so I'm not really confident that, okay, yeah, you understand what you're actually answering. Fine, I know most of what I'm answering, but you get some questions that you have seen over and over again, because you have information over and over again. So I don't know. At that point, I don't know whether am I really passing because I know it, or because I'm answering some questions I'm already familiar with.
So the question is, what simulation material are you using?
What
example? You're using what?
Watermark.
Oh, fantastic. Now, if you're using Watermark, don't bother yourself. And you're doing the 120 questions, right? Yes. Are you on the... Okay. Now, just rely on... You see that repetition you're saying? That question, it's residing somewhere in your brain. When you meet any question in the exam or that talks about something that is similar, trust me, Watermark question is different from actual exam. I can say that at 100% different. However, you know what Watermark does? Watermark lifts questions from BABOK. All their question scenario, they are all from BABOK. Whatever, any way they'll just go to one paragraph and remove that paragraph and put in for your question. And then they'll ask you 2, 3, 4 questions on that. That's how most of their questions are. Now, when you miss it and you have to go back to BABOK, you've mastered that skill there. So it's possible that in the course of reading, you've missed that out, but Watermark has brought you back to that point. So I would say you're not doing anything wrong. In fact, you're doing very well. If you, I can't remember scoring 90 something all through my simulations. Yeah.
So, Sholan,
however, you need to be confident. Confidence is very important. Yes. Confidence is very important. So if you think that you're not confident enough, then why not do some gap analysis? Are there some areas you think you've not mastered? Now, for me, I did all the simulations in Simply Learn. I think they had lots of questions. But by the time I started Watermark, I knew Simply Learn was just a baby because their questions were direct, but Watermark was scenario-based. So that drilled me more. So if you see, it's not, nobody can tell you that, oh, you are ready 100%, you can go into examination 1. No. In fact, it's a good feeling if you are not feeling that confident because you hunger for more, you want to read more. The moment you feel confident that I've mastered everything, really, we all don't get so confident going into examination hall. By the end of the day, we go and we ace it. So if you ask me, I think you're doing well in what you're doing. If you think you've mastered it, you've seen this question, the most important thing is that I have a very good understanding of why. Now, another question. When you do the simulation, do you go back and review all the answers you got?
Yeah, that's
the answer you didn't get.
I do that every time. Immediately I'm done, I go back. The ones
fantastic.
I go back to BABOK. Even the ones I pass, just to be sure that I actually.
You need to review the questions you passed on, so that it's not just a fluke or a guess. You just guessed it, you know. Yeah, so that's what I would say. If you're doing all things right, I mean, your strategy seems right to me. Just continue, and then before your exam, have a good sleep, you know, have a good meal, a good drink, and then walk into your exam sharp, like no matter what question comes your way, you're gonna nail it. Okay.
I have a question. I have a quick question, please.
Yes, please.
Sorry, before we go to the next question, Rita, Rita and I were in the same study group. So Rita, you are over ready, please.
Aha!
Rita and I were in the same study group and we were jacking, reading together. So Rita, you're over ready because it's important that you are very confident. It's, you know, so I think I can say, you know, and maybe like 9.9% that you are ready. But you know, what I was trying to say, you know, was there's a lady I spoke to earlier this month, and she is supposed to be here, but her children and all that, so she couldn't make it. Because if she was here now, maybe she would have added to this discussion. She was scoring 90. In fact, she told me that the last test she did, she scored 93%. She was scoring between 80 something to 93%. And she went for the exam. She was very confident, and then she didn't pass. And she was really worried, and she said, what happened? You know, so I discussed with someone else, and because I was like, why, how would someone be getting that kind of score and take the exam and she doesn't pass? So I was discussing with someone, and this thing that you said, Shola, was what she said. She said, you know, was she reviewing the answers? Because you know this thing, there's a way you'll be doing it every day, and then you know all the answers. And you know, watermark, they repeat these questions. So it gets to a point, it's there. So you see the questions and you're now picking the answers, and then you'll be scoring very high. Then it gets to the exam day, and then you see different questions and you panic. So it's important that, you know, after each simulation, you go through both the ones you failed and the ones you got right, and then you refer back to Babok. So I'm happy that Rita said she's actually doing that. So for others that are here too, that are also listening, it's very important. So
okay, Shem, can you go ahead?
Ask your
question.
Yeah,
just quickly. For those people, I also have Watermark, but I haven't signed up to the online platform yet. For those people who practice questions on Watermark, do they have a question bank that gives you questions according to the knowledge areas?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Don't worry. I mean, I love exams a lot. So whether I know the topic or not, I'm going to dive into it. Like, there is no mountain that we can. CBAP, forget it. You ace it. Just be strategic about it. That's always what I advise. You have to be strategic. There's nothing like, no time this week. I'll read next week. Once a week. Oh, no. Consistency, discipline, have a plan. It will work out at the end of the day, trust me. If you can do those things, it will work out. It's worked out for so many people. And the study group I was, at the end of, I was the first, definitely. Everybody like, Shola, you've booked. You're like, please, I need to motivate myself to. I cannot keep studying for 1 year, 2 years because I want to write CBAP. It's not the first, and they will make the last exam. You know, when I booked the exam, I was far from ready. But then it propelled me to do more. And then after my exam, I always did a debrief with my team. Hey guys, this is what happened. Trust me, will you remember any question to tell your neighbor? Absolutely not. Because 120 scenarios, you even get tired. So you can't even remember a question that you're telling someone else that, this was what came out to. I can only say that, okay, I met questions on solution evaluation, I met questions on, but then the strategy. First 20 questions, I was sweating, man. They brought one long table, like with calculator. I'm like, what's this? Tons, metrics. For God's sake. But then I just flagged them and moved ahead. I'm still going to 120. The first 30 minutes. So, we've done a lot of simulations before, right? So 120 questions, 3.5 minutes. Because I've done a lot of 120 question simulation, I already said, okay, 30 minutes, I must cover this question. In another 30 minutes, at the first of my 30 minutes, I thought I was way behind. I'm like, what's going on? So this is what this exam simulation actually help you to. It simulates the actual exam environment for you to be able to perform better, behave better during exam. So don't worry, if you have the right strategy plan, you're committed and consistent, no matter how, I mean, I like to be focused, no matter how tired. I have 2 kids, and then I have my husband, I have to cook, I have to do more, I have to do all sorts, you understand? But then, when I'm feeling sleepy like this, I'll still open Babok or open
Every
study
day.
guide. You,
Has to be
consistency and
consistent.
discipline, you'll get it, yeah. Anyway, okay, so let's move on. At the end of the day, what are we trying to do? What are we getting? What is our output from analyze potential value and recommend solution? Of course, it's the solution recommendation. Now, remember, solution recommendation identifies the suggested most appropriate solution based on an evaluation that we've done. Now, the recommended solution should maximize the value provided to the enterprise. Okay, so this is the last quiz we are going to have. Where are you? Oh no. Okay. So this one actually has 4 questions in it. So I'll give you about 2.5 minutes to get it done. You have 4 questions. And they are really giveaway actually. I mean, just to solidify all that we've learned so far. Okay. Just 1 submission in 1 minute. What's going on? We have 4 questions in this poll. No rush, take your time. Understand the question. Okay, we have 6 submissions. Okay, we have 7. Let's have 2 more. 8, good, good, good. Let's have 1 more or 2 more. Okay, we have 9 and we have 10. That's good. So let's end the poll and share the results. Okay, now I'm worried. The first question, which of the following are tasks performed as part of requirement analysis? By now, we should know how many tasks do we have in RADD, requirement analysis and design definition. How many tasks do we have?
6.
6.
Good, 6. Now, can we tell me the 6, the first?
Specify model.
Model.
Good.
Verify.
Verify. Validate.
Define
Good.
architecture.
Define architecture.
Good. 5.
Define
solution
design
options.
6.
Then
analyze,
recommend.
Analyze
and
potential
recommend.
value and recommend solution.
Thank you. So, manage solution scope and approach is just a fabricated answer. It doesn't belong there. Prepare requirement package. It doesn't belong there. So it goes back to how many tasks do we have that are associated with the overall 6 knowledge areas in Babok? Do we remember the number? What's the total number of tasks that we have? 30. Good. You need to master those 30 tasks because when they ask you a question, you need to know which one is in which. Not just the numbers, but you need to be able to tell at the, at your fingertip what these tasks are and which knowledge area they belong to. If I say define current state, which knowledge area does it belong to? Define, analyze current state, sorry.
Strategy analysis.
Strategy analysis.
Good. If I say prioritize requirements.
Requirement
life cycle management.
If I say plan stakeholder engagement.
Business.
BAPM. No, chapter 4.
BAPM.
Okay, when you say chapter 4, it depends on what material you're using, right? But when we say BAPM, it's chapter 1 or so. No,
chapter 3. Chapter 3,
exactly. Because they have some introduction. Now, if I say conduct elicitation, that's a giveaway. So you have to know which tasks belong to which knowledge area. Very important, please. 6 knowledge areas, 30 tasks. Okay, the second one. What imposes limitations on your solution? Okay, good. We all picked constraint. Constraint is what actually poses limitation on your solution. Okay, let's go to the third one. What is the purpose of non-functional? Fantastic. Thank you. Defining quality attributes and design constraint of the solution. That's the answer. And the last one, this becomes tricky, right? During requirement analysis, after identifying, exploring, and describing different possible ways of meeting the need, please tell me, what tasks did they just describe there?
Analyze.
What tasks?
Analyze potential value and recommend solution.
No. The question.
Design option.
Exactly. Define the design option. That is what the question is asking you. Now, the question is not saying, what is the next logical step? So when you describe the design option, what do you do after that?
Analyze value and recommend.
Analyze potential value and recommend solution. This is the way question comes in. So imagine if you didn't know the task that is in RADD, how would you be able to identify the answer? Okay, so we all did well. We all did well in this, thank you. So we move on to, now this is just to show us the entire picture of how, in terms of the tasks and the techniques, because I know it can be cumbersome or not. We have some, especially when you're using study guide, it says some are recommended or not. But however, holistically, this is what the different tasks are and the ones that are recommended for each one. So just make sure you have a good understanding of all the 50 techniques in BABOK. Okay. Now, we're going to pick just about 4 or 5 techniques to just look at. We talked about use case and scenario. Which one is the one way of describing an event?
Scenario.
Good job, scenario. Now, I said good job. That's the way I told my daughters. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And then which one, it's all encompassing, defines different ways of achieving a goal. Use case, thank you. So, that's what the description is here. And then once you've done your use case where you have all the descriptions and all, then you come up with something like this, like a use case diagram trying to describe the actor and the system. So a use case diagram actually helps you to visualize, what is going on in a system. Now, what are the key concepts in a use case? That is where we have all of this. You have the name, the description, the goal, the actor, the precondition. Precondition just means what is necessary, what is required before any of these use case can start. You have the triggers, you have the flow of events, you have the alternate flow. Those are not normal flows. Those are alternate, like we described earlier. You have exception flows. Now, these alternate or exception flow may end the use case or not, depending on how, what the event is to start with. You have relationships, and then you have post condition. This is what a typical use case looks like, and what is in there. We have a lot of information sometimes that, we add, but at least at a minimum, you must have these key concepts in your use case. Data flow diagrams. Data flow diagrams is just talking about how data is coming from somewhere and going to another place. Shows where data is coming from, which activity is processing the data, what is the output of that data. That's what data flow diagrams helps us to see. Now, the first level of a data flow diagram, I mean, the highest level is what we now refer to as a context diagram. Context diagram is where you just have that one process and then you have its external entities relating with the process. So for example, let's say we have a learning management system. Who are the people that relate with the learning management system in my organization? Okay, so you have your educators, you have the customers, you have the regulators, you have the SMEs, you have the, and remember, all of these external entities, these boxes, these square boxes that we see here, there's going to be an interaction. So if you talk about SME, well, how do they relate with the LMS? Okay, so they design courses, they provide content. If you talk about end users, how do they relate? Oh, they complete course. So these lines are referred to as flows. And then the flows are usually labeled to show how those external entities relate with the process. Now, the level 1 diagram for a context diagram is where you now break those processes. That one process, you can now decompose it into other processes. And then you can have level 2, depending on how granular you really want to go. Okay. Prototyping. Remember we talked about prototyping, right? So what's the pop-up word for prototyping?
What's the pop-up word?
Yeah, so when they ask you a question that requires you to choose prototyping as an answer, what are the keywords you're looking for?
Mock-up or simulation?
Mock-up.
Mock-up is part of it, yes.
Abstraction.
Yes, yes, it can be an abstraction.
Simulation. Simulation?
Yes, simulations, visualization, trying to see the visual of a proposed solution. Yeah, so all of those words should, help us to know that, okay, I think they're talking about mock-ups. Now, what is the difference between wireframe and mock-up? So wireframe is just a skeletal diagram of the system to describe the functionality of the solution. However, when you now make that wireframe very fancy, you add color, text, images, just to make it more, I mean, who goes into a presentation and go and present wireframe? You're going to lose your audience, right? But when you go in with a mock-up, it's more real to them. It's relatable. So that's the difference between mock-up or wireframe. But at the end of the day, we are talking about prototyping. We're talking about simulation methods. Okay. Let's look at the next one. Functional decomposition. I mean, this is quite kind of straightforward. It just helps you to manage complexity of requirements. Remember, your requirement must be atomic, must be understandable, must be unambiguous, must be clear, concise. No, there's no clear there. Concise, complete, So when we're talking about functional decomposition, it's just breaking down those complex requirements into simpler forms, to reduce the uncertainty of someone not understanding it or losing requirements. And that's all what functional requirements is talking about. Now, when you talk about the element, remember what we discussed. Each of these techniques has a framework, which is what? What's the framework? There is a name I mentioned.
Architecture?
Dupe. D or dupe. Let's come on, let's make it more tish. Dupe. Dupe. D-U-P-E. Description, usage, purpose, and element. Dupe. That's the structure for all techniques. Okay, so elements. Okay, yeah. You want to say something?
She used hush puppy then.
Okay. Who is hush puppy?
Let's not go there.
We're trying to touch it up now. So we are not using dupe. Let's use hush puppy.
Dupe.
Please say hush puppy, please.
Okay. So when we talk about elements, what are the things you consider when you are doing functional decomposition? The mnemonic is rose made. Like I put it here, rose made. Rose made. Reusing, optimizing, substituting, encapsulation, measuring and managing, analyzing, designing, and estimating and forecasting. Roles made. I think I saw one question that has to do with roles made. So they were asking something and they said, okay, which one is not part of it? If you don't know the elements of functional decomposition in the first place. So for example, they said, oh, there's a requirement that, you know, is too complex and ambiguous and needs to be broken down. What do you think Lisa should consider when doing this? They're talking about elements of functional decomposition. But if you've not mastered it, how would you even know what to remove or not? I actually came across one question in the exam on this. So please, mnemonics, roles made. Okay. And then we'll go on to talk about subject of decomposition, level of decomposition, representation. So this is what a function, when you are trying to decompose something. So you have a big requirement this way, and then it's possible that you can break it out into 2 sub-functions. Now the sub-functions go, now this is the same as when you are doing your work breakdown structure, right? But remember, work breakdown structure is not a technique, but it's very similar to what we do in functional decomposition. We are trying to break something big into smaller components. Okay, now let's review an example again. Let's say, okay, we have something to do with an LMS, and this is Jasmine. So Jasmine is age 35 and needs to complete training and certification to aid a career transition. Now, what are the different parts? I mean, this requirement is big, right? How do we decompose it into smaller components? Okay, here we are. Okay, does Jasmine need that element? Okay, oh no, maybe she needs training. Okay, what does she need to do again in terms of pro-exam prep? Okay, in terms of training, okay, what does she need? Does she need to connect with someone online? Does she need videos? You can see there are different parts, right? And then it's subjective. There is no right or wrong, depending on what your focus is and your end goal. So that's all about functional decomposition, trying to break complex requirements into smaller components. Okay, is there something missing here? Oh, okay, I thought as much. All right, so this is talking about organization model. I'm sure we all have org charts in our organizations and all of that. And then who can tell me where organizational modeling, what model category it falls under?
People.
People and roles.
People and roles.
Roles, yeah. People and roles.
People and roles. That is where we have organizational factor modeling. So it does describe people, roles, reporting structures that exist within an organization. So there might be different types. You might have market-oriented, functionally oriented, or the matrix. I think these days, most organizations actually use matrix model because all these functionally oriented or market-oriented tend to build silos that you really don't want in an organization. But however, you might still find some organizations using, you know, either of the first two. It also helps to describe roles, interfaces, you know, the charts, the lines, the boxes, and all of that. And then we have the strengths and weaknesses. Like I said, strengths and limitations. It's good you go through the techniques in BABOK. Try and understand all the 50 techniques using the dupe approach. Okay. Okay, so what have we been talking about? This is the full story of RADD. This is the full story of, just go through it for a minute. I don't want to talk. Go through it. Does it make sense to you? Follow the arrows. Does it make sense to you, everything we've gone through tonight? Like, does it represent the full story when you start from elicitation results and you end up with a recommended solution? I think I don't need to really go through this because it just speaks for itself based on what we've discussed tonight. Okay, these are my references. BABOK is #1.
Oh,
and then, you know, yeah. So I think that's all I have for you tonight.
Can you share the slide with us, or is it confidential?
Not really confidential. I'll think about it. Maybe if you bribe me enough.
How can I bribe you? Let me bribe you by promising you that I'll put in extra effort and pass my exam. Would that make
exactly? You must promise me that,
yes,
actually.
Consistency and determination.
Yeah.
Could you show us the references again, please?
Okay.
Yeah, that would be amazing if you would be willing to share that. I feel so, I'm supposed to write on Tuesday, and now I'm thinking I probably should take some more time. I think I answered every question wrong, even though, you know, I'm kidding, but, you know, it's just a completely different perspective. And I saved RAD to the end of all my studying because I knew that it would be the most challenging. And after this presentation, I realized that I probably need to spend more time than what I had already done. So it's good, but it's also, it's overwhelming for sure.
You know, that is really heavy. So that's why
It's very, yeah.
It is actually.
It's like the meat and potatoes of everything.
Exactly.
Now, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm not confident with RAD, then I'm not sure that it's a good idea that I write right away, which is super disappointing, but I guess good in a way.
I mean, feel free. I think you have about 48 hours to move your exam if you have to, but don't move it too much. If you have to move it once, fine. But then, and this is what I advise, right? Please do a gap analysis. Know what you need to go back to. Then set your exam date. Give yourself a timeline. Okay, I mean, I've identified that, okay, I think I need to go back to RADD. I think I should be able to, I'll be fine within a week or two, and then book your exam. So if you're moving it, don't just move it to another date. Be strategic about the things you need to cover first, and then try and look at your work schedules. I mean, does it work for me? How many days do I need? And then you now book your exam so that you don't have to move that date again.
When Chichi said, you know, did you book your exam? I'm like, what? Book my exam? No.
Okay.
But I have just been relentless like a dog with a bone since that happened about 3 weeks ago. And before that, it was just dragging on forever. So it definitely lit a fire under me to book the exam. But yeah, I'm thinking, I don't want to, I've already failed this exam, so I don't want to fail again. And
you won't. Yeah.
So I need to be more sure. And
Just
BABOK is great, but the interaction, the presentations, different work groups, like study groups, those are just absolutely priceless because they sort of bring BABOK to life. Anyway, I won't keep you all, but I did want to mention that I'm an early riser, so like I'm up like 24 hours now or something. But I did want to thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. Any last words?
Same thing as Danielle said. Thank you so much. It's been, I think, just being able to decompose RAD, like to think of how enormous, like it has the most everything, but you're able to like decompose it, break it down, and just like I really got a lot from this session, and I'm very grateful. And thanks, Chichi, for bringing Shola, so teach us and take us through this session, and it's been so helpful, and I'm very appreciative of both of you's time and efforts in seeing us pass and succeed. And yeah, by God's grace, we'll all pass and share our story. And for sure, mention your names definitely. Personally, for me, because it was all from LinkedIn, right? I would have just not messaged anyone, and just to see how the network is growing, like just constantly learning from different people has been very amazing for me. And like Danielle said, I made this decision. I was supposed to write my exam tomorrow, but I made a decision last week. I'm like, I'm not ready. I know I could do more, and I moved my exam to July. So just putting in more effort now to like be consistent, be determined, and tell myself that I have to pass, like, and do what I have to do to pass, because people like you guys passed it, and so with your help I can pass as well. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, someone put a question here, please. Is cramming encouraged for CBAP? exam, considering the fact that questions are lifted directly from BABO guide. Okay, so for CBAP exam, questions are not lifted directly. They are all case scenarios. Now, is cramming, I won't say cramming, I'll say commit to memory. So some things you need to commit to memory. How do you know your 50 techniques? No, not 50 techniques. You don't need to actually commit to memory your 50 techniques. Just have a good understanding. But how do you know your 30 tasks if you've not done it over and over? Now, the difference between committing to memory and mastering it is, first, when you start out to know your 30 tasks, you start out with committing to memory. But when you do it over and over and over again, you master it. So you've moved away from the commit to memory phase into the mastering phase. You've mastered. If anybody wakes me up any day, anytime, I can tell you the 30 techniques, even though I've done my exams way fast. So that is the way it should be. If you cram, you'll forget. But start with cramming, then use the power of repetition to master it. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Chichi, I'll hand over to you here.
Yeah, before you, I just want to say thank you very, very much. Shola had a very busy day today, had meetings back to back, and she still showed up today and did this, and she took her time to prepare the slides. This is just, I'm so touched. Thank you very much, Shola. Thank you. And
thank you so much.
Just told her about this week. I'm like, and she just jumped, and she was just so willing to help. And so this is Shola really inspired me as well when I was reading for my exam, because I told you guys of the project I was on, and Shola was really instrumental, really put me through and all that. So Shola, thank you very much. I appreciate this, and this is us just trying to, it's not easy, but, just helping others pass their exam. For me, it's priceless. It just brings me joy. And with people like you, that are also willing to share their time and their knowledge, I can keep doing this over and over again. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shola. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to be doing this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. This is almost 12 midnight, and thank you for everyone that stayed till the end. I wish you all luck in your exams, and then, it's still Sunday for the next session. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
So can we get the slides?
Yes.
Yes, you will.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, not only for the material, but the actual technique and the strategy for the exam. The way that you put together these slides is going to help me focus on how I should put things together, because I found it almost trivial to understand. Once it's structured in a particular way, it sits in your brain, and then you can actually, as you say, master it. So thanks very much for that, and good night.
Welcome. You're welcome. Yeah. Chichi, you were going to say something?
Someone was asking for your full name.
Okay, Olushola Akoni, O-L-U-S-O-L-A. Okay, let me type it in here.
I've typed it out already.
Okay, you've typed it out. Okay, then Akoni, A-K-A-N-N-I. Yeah. I mean, feel free anytime. I'm happy. It's I'm very passionate about project management, business analysis. Because you can really relate with them in all that we do. So yeah, thank you. Framework is very important, just like Judy mentioned. And that was why we started with a pre-pool session. You need to understand the framework. Then it will help you to master things. Yeah, it does. Very good point, Judy. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, once again.
Hello?
Yeah.
Good night.
Oh, who is that? I think we can stop. Okay. Does anyone have any question? Someone was saying something now.